What if the greatest business minds of our era aren't the polished Ivy League executives sitting in pristine corner offices?
Right, the guys in the tailored suits.
Exactly.
Hmm.
What if instead they're actually a band of, like, dyslexic, blue-collar, repeatedly bullied outsiders?
I love that description.
I mean, people who work barefoot, curse like sailors, and operate way more like a family of pirates than a traditional consultancy.
It really shatters the whole corporate archetype.
It totally does. So today, we are doing a deep dive into the origin story of the advisory firm Play Bigger, based on the introduction to their book, which is titled From Bad Tuna to Play Bigger.
Such a great title.
Yeah, we'll get into the bad tuna part later, but over the next hour or so, you're going to learn why being completely catastrophically wrong about the timing of a visionary idea might actually be the greatest advantage you can have in business.
It's a huge mindset shift,
Yeah.
for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship.
Right, and it completely breaks down what we're told success is supposed to look like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have this ingrained, almost cinematic expectation of where legendary business strategy comes from.
Like mahogany boardrooms.
Yes, exactly. Delivered by people who have basically never stepped off this very narrow, highly privileged escalator.
Right, the whole high school to a top-tier university straight into a junior executive program, up the ladder.
But the three core founders of Play, Bigger Al Ramadan, Christopher Lochhead, and Dave Peterson, they experienced a completely different reality.
Yeah, they really did.
Their path to understanding how markets work wasn't learned in some prestigious MBA program.
No way.
It was forged through, well, severe undeniable failure, and this really profound sense of always being on the outside looking in.
So let's start right there, actually, with that outsider identity, because if you want to understand how a group of people ends up revolutionizing tech strategy, you kind of have to look at where their initial worldview was formed.
Right, their foundational experiences.
Yeah. So let's look at Al Ramadan first. Where does he enter the picture?
So, Al's story begins in Australia, but definitely not as part of the established upper crust society there.
Okay.
His father was a Cypriot immigrant who moved to Australia for work. He was very blue collar.
Got it.
And when you grow up in that environment, as a first-generation child of an immigrant, you are immediately steeped in a very specific kind of friction.
Like a cultural clash?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're absorbing the culture of your home country, but you're constantly navigating the established culture of your new environment.
Right.
So there is this relentless underlying pressure to prove your worth, basically, to justify your family's presence through just sheer work ethic.
You're navigating two worlds simultaneously, which means you can't really just take the default rules of society for granted.
Right. You don't at all.
You have to observe them from the outside.
Precisely. You learn very early on that the system wasn't built for you.
Right.
And then, if you move over to Christopher Lochhead, you see this totally different variation of that same friction.
Yeah, his story's wild.
It is. So Christopher grew up in Montreal. And Montreal is this vibrant, predominantly French-speaking city. But Christopher was raised in an English and Scottish family.
So he's already the odd man out.
Right. Culturally, he's already in the minority. But his true barrier, the thing that profoundly shaped his psychology, was actually academic.
Okay. How so?
As a teenager, he was constantly flunking out of school. He never went to college.
Wow.
Yeah, for the first 2 decades of his life, he was operating under this agonizing assumption that he was just simply unintelligent.
That is so heavy.
It wasn't until he reached his 20s that he was formally diagnosed with dyslexia.
I want to pause on that because the psychological weight of that experience is just staggering.
It really is.
Imagine sitting in a classroom day after day, year after year, and watching your peers easily decode letters on a chalkboard while your brain simply refuses to process the information in the same way.
Yeah, it's isolating.
The educational system is telling you, implicitly and explicitly, that you are failing at the most basic tasks of childhood. How does a person not just collapse under that?
Well, they either collapse or they build an incredibly robust compensatory mechanism.
Like workaround.
Exactly. If you are placed in a game where the rules guarantee your failure, in this case, reading comprehension and standardized testing, you have to figure out a different way to play.
Or invent a new game entirely.
Right. Because Christopher couldn't rely on the written word the way others did. He had to hyper-develop his verbal communication.
Oh, that makes sense.
He had to develop his ability to read a room and his capacity to persuade people through spoken narrative.
He had to become a storyteller.
Yes, When you strip away the ability to coast on academic credentials, you are left with just raw hustle. You have to convince people of your value through sheer force of personality and ideas.
Which eventually turns him into, like, a legendary chief marketing officer. He takes the exact adaptation that saved him in a high school classroom and scales it to a massive corporate level.
It's brilliant.
It really is. But before we get to their professional lives, we need to talk about Dave Peterson. Because his origin story might actually be the most intense of the three.
Oh, Dave's background is incredibly compelling. He was born in rural Iowa.
Okay, classic American farm boy setting.
Right. But his mother was Japanese, and she had actually survived the horrific fire bombings of Japan during World War II,
Oh my God.
which is a profound trauma in its own right, obviously. She later married an American military man who also worked as a crop duster, and they settled back in the Iowa countryside.
Let's just contextualize that for a second. A mixed race, half Japanese kid growing up in rural post-World War II America.
Yeah, in the heartland.
The cultural hostility he must have faced is just hard to overstate.
It was severe. He stood out immediately, and he was relentlessly targeted and picked on because of his Japanese heritage.
That's awful.
But the critical piece of the puzzle here is how Dave actually responded to that relentless bullying.
How did he?
Well, when a child is physically outmatched or outnumbered, fighting back with fists usually just escalates the abuse, right?
Yeah, that usually doesn't end well.
And just folding inward and hiding destroys your spirit. So David didn't either.
What did he do?
He developed this highly sophisticated defensive strategy. He learned to outsmart his tormentors using psychology.
Wait, hold on. How does a kid in rural Iowa use psychology to fend off bullies? Like, what does that actually look like in practice?
It looks like an intense, hypervigilant study of human behavior.
Okay, observing them.
Dave learned to read the underlying insecurities of the people attacking him. He learned how to manipulate social dynamics.
Wow, really?
Yeah, maybe by using humor to deflect tension, or by subtly pitting the bullies against each other, or even just anticipating a social threat before it even materialized in the schoolyard.
So he became like a playground profiler.
He essentially became a self-taught behavioral psychologist out of pure necessity. He learned to map the power structures of a room.
That is fascinating.
It's no coincidence that when he finally went to college, he initially majored in psychology.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, though in true Dave fashion, he jokes that he only switched to a public relations major later because that's where all the girls were.
That's hilarious. But it's a funny deflection, right? Because it masks a very serious foundational skill.
Absolutely.
All three of these guys were forced by their circumstances to become elite observers of human behavior.
Right.
They couldn't rely on the status quo because the status quo was actively rejecting them.
Perfectly said.
So you have this Cypriot Australian, a dyslexic dropout from Montreal, and a bullied mixed-race kid from Iowa.
Quite the trio.
And they all independently navigate these twisty, unconventional paths to Silicon Valley in the 1990s.
Yep.
And this is where the story gets really fascinating because they don't arrive and just immediately conquer the world.
No, they do not.
They fail. And they fail in a very specific, catastrophic way.
They failed spectacularly. And they all did it during the exact same distinct economic window, which was the late 1990s dot-com boom and the subsequent 2001 crash.
Right, the bubble bursting.
And the nature of these failures is highly instructive if you want to understand their eventual philosophy.
Okay, let's start with Al Ramadan then.
So before the late 90s, Al was actually working as the chief technology officer for Australia's America's Cup yacht racing team.
Okay, yacht racing.
During that time, he had a massive epiphany. He looked at the boats, which were increasingly being loaded with these early network devices and sensors.
Right, all the tech on board.
Yeah, and he realized they were generating a massive amount of telemetry data in real time. Wind speed, hull stress, GPS positioning, everything.
And yacht racing, let's be honest, is an incredibly difficult sport to watch on traditional television.
Oh, it's terrible on TV.
To the untrained eye, it's literally just white triangles moving very slowly across a blue background.
Yeah.
You have no sense of the micro adjustments or the intense physical stress the crew is actually under.
Exactly. The TV broadcast just couldn't capture the reality of the sport. So Al founded a company called Quokka Sports in the late 1990s.
Quokka Sports.
Right. His vision was to take all that raw, real-time sports data and creatively display it on the internet. He wanted to build an immersive second-screen experience.
Oh, wow.
The idea was that whether you were watching sailing, car racing, or the Olympics, you wouldn't just watch a passive broadcast. You would be on your computer watching the data stream, seeing the heart rates of the athletes, tracking their exact positioning on a digital map.
But wait, that is literally how we consume sports today.
It is exactly how we do it today.
Like, if I'm watching a Formula One race, I have the TV broadcast on, but I also have an app open showing me the tire degradation data, the sector times, the onboard cameras. If I'm watching football, Amazon Web Services is overlaying route probabilities and player speeds on the screen in real time. So Al wasn't just guessing. He accurately predicted the exact future of sports media.
He was 100% fundamentally correct about the future.
Amazing.
It was a brilliant, visionary idea, but there was a fatal flaw. He was 10 to 20 years too early.
Ah, the timing.
Think about the infrastructure of the internet in 1998 and 1999. People were largely on dial-up modems.
Oh man, the screeching sound of dial-up.
Exactly. Bandwidth was incredibly restricted. The idea of seamlessly streaming massive packets of real-time telemetry data to a consumer's desktop was technologically agonizing.
Yeah, it would just buffer forever.
Right. Furthermore, consumer habits hadn't shifted yet. People weren't used to sitting on a computer while simultaneously watching a television.
We didn't have iPads to just hold on the couch.
Exactly. So Quota Sports generated massive buzz. They went public. They thrived during the peak exuberance of the dot-com bubble.
Okay, so they had initial success.
They did. But when the bubble burst in 2000, the capital markets dried up. And because the underlying infrastructure and consumer habits just weren't ready to support the business model organically, Quokka couldn't survive the winter. They closed their doors in 2001.
Wow. So the vision was literally flawless, but the timing was a complete death sentence.
Yes.
Did Christopher have a similar experience?
Christopher's trajectory was slightly different, but it ended in the exact same crater.
Okay, tell me about Christopher.
By the late 90s, he had hustled his way up to become a marketing legend in Silicon Valley. The book describes him as the Bruce Willis of CMOs.
The Bruce Willis of CMOs.
Yeah, meaning if Bruce Willis played a chief marketing officer in a Die Hard movie, that would be Christopher.
That is quite the visual.
He was brash, loud, intensely creative, and just unapologetic. He became the CMO of a consulting company called Scient, and Scient was an absolute rocket ship.
What exactly did Scient do?
They were an e-business consulting firm. At that time, you have to remember, massive, traditional Fortune 500 companies were looking at the internet and just panicking.
Right, they had no idea what a website even was.
Exactly. They didn't know how to build a website, let alone transition their legacy operations to e-commerce. So Scient would come in and consult on how to digitize their businesses.
Which was basically a license to print money at that time.
Oh, demand was so astronomical that Scient hired 2,000 people in just 36 months.
2,000 in 3 years.
Yep. They were the darling of Wall Street. They even made the cover of Forbes magazine in the year 2000.
Okay, so that is the absolute pinnacle. Cover of Forbes, a massive workforce, riding the biggest economic wave in modern history.
But it was built on a very fragile foundation.
Why?
Because a massive portion of Scient's revenue wasn't just coming from legacy companies, it was coming from other dot-com startups who were flush with venture capital money.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. When the NASDAQ crashed in 2000 and 2001, those dot-com clients didn't just cut their budgets. They ceased to exist.
They vanished overnight.
They evaporated. And if you are a consulting firm whose entire client base suddenly goes bankrupt overnight, you have no revenue.
Right.
Science rocket ship disintegrated midair. The company filed for bankruptcy. Christopher went from being this marketing genius on the cover of magazines to watching his entire empire collapse due to macroeconomic forces far outside his control.
Man, so Al is destroyed by infrastructure timing, and Christopher is destroyed by a macroeconomic bubble bursting?
Exactly.
What about Dave? Did he get crushed too?
Dave took an entrepreneurial leap that mirrors Al's in its visionary tragedy.
What did he build?
In the late 90s, Dave co-founded a company called Give Me Talk.
Give Me Talk, okay.
His premise was that the internet could democratize audio broadcasting. He wanted to create a brand new market category that he called Internet Talk Radio.
Oh, wow.
The idea was that anyone, anywhere, could record a show and distribute it globally over the internet, completely bypassing traditional radio syndication and FCC licenses. He was convinced they were going to build a massive media empire.
Wait, hold on. Internet Talk Radio where anyone can record and distribute a show?
Yeah.
That is a podcast. He literally invented the concept of podcasting.
He built the precursor to the exact medium we are using right
That
now.
is insane.
But try to find anyone today who has ever heard of Give Me Talk. You can't. Because just like Al, Dave was disastrously early.
Let's break down why that fails in the 90s. Because on paper, it sounds like a complete slam dunk.
It fails for the same reasons an electric car would have failed in 1985.
Right.
You can build a brilliant machine, but if there are no charging stations, no lithium-ion supply chains, and no consumers who understand how to use it, the machine is useless.
So what were the bottlenecks for Give Me Talk?
They were insurmountable. In the late 90s, audiophiles were massive, and internet speeds were glacial. Trying to download a one-hour audio show over a 56K dial-up modem would tie up your home phone line for hours.
Oh, your parents would scream at you for being on the internet.
Exactly. And more importantly, how do you listen to it once you have it?
Yeah.
You had to sit tethered to a bulky desktop computer.
Because there were no smartphones.
There were no iPods, there were no smartphones. The concept of portable, on-demand digital audio simply did not exist in the consumer's mind. The RSS feed technology that eventually allowed podcasts to automatically download to devices hadn't been widely adopted.
Right.
Dave built a brilliant product for a world that wouldn't exist for another decade. So the company failed.
I want to challenge something here because this is a really crucial distinction for anyone listening.
Sure.
If you go to any startup conference today, you will be beaten over the head with the mantra, fail fast, fail often.
Oh, yeah. It's everywhere.
Modern tech culture has heavily romanticized failure. But isn't there a massive difference between building a genuinely bad product that nobody wants, which is, how most startups fail, and what Al, Christopher, and Dave went through?
A massive difference, yes.
Because they experience a very specific, agonizing type of failure. They were fundamentally right about the future, but they failed at category readiness. How does surviving that specific type of trauma uniquely wire a founder's brain?
That is the defining question of their entire philosophy. When you build a bad product, your takeaway from failure is relatively simple. You think, I need to build better features, or I need to fix my supply chain.
It's an operational lesson.
Exactly. It's operational. But when you build a visionary product at the wrong time, the lesson is entirely different. Your takeaway becomes, the product itself is irrelevant if the environment is not conditioned to receive it.
Wow. That is a chilling realization for a product engineer. To realize that the quality of your code or your hardware is completely secondary to the psychological readiness of the market.
Exactly. It strips away your ego completely. You realize that you cannot simply force your brilliance onto the world through sheer will.
You have to prepare the world for it.
You have to understand the deep, underlying currents of human behavior, technology adoption, and economic cycles. Think about Dave. He already knew how to read the psychological state of a room to defend himself from bullies.
Right.
But failing with Give Me Talk forced him to scale that skill to a macro level. He realized he didn't just have to read the room, he had to read the entire market. He had to ask, is the collective psychology of the consumer ready for this?
And for Christopher.
For Christopher, watching Science collapse taught him that you can't just react to market narratives. You have to actively shape and control the category itself, because you ride a wave you don't control, like the dot-com bubble, it will eventually drown you.
It's funny, you hear all this and you realize how much time we waste in our own careers trying to polish away our weirdness or trying to hide the projects that didn't work out.
Oh, absolutely.
We try to present this unbroken string of linear successes on our resumes. But if you look at these three, their entire strategic superpower was forged in the fires of being outsiders and being catastrophically early.
Their origin story.
The corporate world often implicitly tells you that your unconventional background is a liability. But if you are trying to anticipate the future, an outsider's lens is actually the only thing that works. If you are deeply entrenched in the status quo, you will never see the disruption coming.
And, that shared trauma of being burned by the dot-com crash is what eventually brings them all together. Because when you get battered that badly while trying to play the solo visionary, you deeply realize the limits of working alone.
You need a support system.
You realize you cannot survive another macroeconomic winter by yourself.
Which naturally leads us to how they eventually structured Play Bigger. Because they didn't just form a standard corporate partnership, did they?
Oh, not at all.
They built something they explicitly describe as a band. And I want to dig into that analogy because the text makes a major point of contrasting the band dynamic with a traditional corporate team.
It's a foundational distinction in the book. If you look at the business section of any bookstore, The vast majority of books are written by a soloist.
Like a CEO autobiography.
Right. It's a legendary CEO, a lone wolf founder, or a single academic researcher handing down their wisdom from the mountaintop.
The genius model.
Exactly. But Play Bigger is fundamentally different. It is explicitly written by a collective. The authors function much less like traditional business partners and much more like brothers.
Interesting.
They're completely bonded, not just in their professional output, but in their lives. The text even notes this quirky detail. They are so close that they occasionally, half-jokingly, call each other honey.
I can safely say I have never heard executives call each other honey in a Fortune 500 boardroom.
Right. It breaks every rule.
That level of intimacy in a corporate setting is just almost unheard of.
It breaks every rule of corporate professionalism. But it points to a level of psychological safety that is incredibly rare. They realized that individually, they were flawed. But collectively, they had what the book describes as Avengers-like complementary superpowers.
I love that. Let's break down the lineup of this band, because the specific roles matter immensely here.
Sure.
Let's do it. Who is playing what instrument?
First, you have Christopher. Christopher is the lead singer.
Mm-hmm.
In a rock band, the lead singer is the front man, right?
Yeah, they're in the spotlight.
They command the stage, they bring the swagger, they set the creative direction, and they are the face of the operation. Christopher brings that brash, cocky, highly creative energy. He is out front, shaping the narrative.
But a lead singer without a band is just a guy yelling a cappella in a room. You need structure behind him.
Exactly. Which brings us to Al. Al is the bass player. In musical terms, the bass player bridges the rhythm and a harmony. They lay down the deep structural foundation of the song.
The groove.
Right. While the lead singer is dancing around the stage, the bass player is ensuring the entire musical structure doesn't collapse. Al is the deeply analytical, structural business mind. He takes Christopher's wild, creative swings and anchors them to economic reality and data.
Okay, so that's the singer and the bass player. And Dave.
Dave is the drummer. The drummer dictates the tempo. They drive the momentum of the song forward. The text explicitly states that Dave is the guy who uniquely reads people, keeps the tempo of the firm, and basically gets shit done.
He keeps the beat.
He is the operational engine. If Al is the logic and Christopher is the emotion, Dave is the pure execution.
Now, there is a fourth member mentioned in the text, too. Kevin Mennany. He isn't a founder of the advisory firm, but he is a co-author of the book. Where does he fit into this band?
So Kevin is a seasoned journalist. He actually covered these guys for USA Today back during the height of the dot-com boom, so he knew their history and had witnessed their spectacular failures firsthand.
Oh, so he had the receipts.
He absolutely did. In the band analogy, Kevin is the guitar player. He brings the journalistic rigor, the narrative structure, and the writing ability to shape their wild, chaotic, pirate-like ideas into a cohesive melody.
He translates them.
He is the translator. You can have a great rhythm section and a charismatic singer, but if you want to record an album, or in this case, write a definitive business book, you need someone who can weave those disparate sounds into something the public can actually consume and understand.
The text mentions a very specific moment when this band actually formed, right? It didn't happen in a boardroom.
No, it happened in 2006 on a ski lift in Lake Tahoe.
Of course it did.
Right. By this point, Al and Christopher had both scraped their way back from the dot-com crash, achieved significant success in subsequent ventures, and had essentially semi-retired. They both had second homes in Tahoe.
Not a bad place to be.
Not at all. They were sitting on a chairlift, suspended in the air, and Al simply turned to Christopher and said, "Why the fuck are we doing this apart? This is nuts. You've got this skill, and I've got that skill. We really should think about doing this together."
I want to stop and really analyze this concept of the band. In a traditional corporate environment, a team is usually just a group of individuals forced into a windowless conference room by an HR department because they happen to share a reporting structure.
That's right.
They often have very similar backgrounds, similar MBAs, and similar blind spots. But a band implies a deep, almost spiritual reliance on distinct, non-overlapping instruments.
Yes, very distinct.
If the drummer drops his sticks, the song stops. If the bass player goes off-key, the lead singer sounds terrible. Why does this deeply emotional, highly specialized bond yield better strategic results than a standard corporate partnership?
It comes down to the elimination of corporate politicking and the presence of radical candor. Think about how a traditional sterile corporate partnership operates.
Lots of meetings.
Lots of meetings, and there is a constant underlying fight for individual credit. People are terrified of exposing their weaknesses or looking stupid in front of their colleagues. If a VP has a terrible idea, The junior executives will often just nod and agree to protect their own careers.
Yeah.
It's an environment built on ego protection.
And ego protection is a massive drain on cognitive resources. You spend half your energy managing perceptions instead of solving the actual problem in front of you.
Precisely. But in a true band like Al, Christopher, and Dave, that dynamic doesn't exist. They all know they are flawed outsiders.
They've seen each other fail.
They have all witnessed each other fail spectacularly.
Right.
There is no pristine image left to protect. Because they possess completely different superpowers, they aren't competing for the same spotlight. Christopher doesn't want to do Al's analytical modeling, and Al doesn't want to be the brash frontman.
That makes total sense.
This creates a state of absolute psychological safety. If Christopher pitches a creative idea that is completely unhinged, Al and Dave can look at him and say that is an awful idea, without Christopher feeling personally attacked.
He knows it's about the work.
He knows they are critiquing the idea, not his value to the band, because they desperately need him to be the lead singer. That level of brutal, frictionless honesty allows them to iterate and arrive at brilliant strategic insights infinitely faster than a traditional consulting team bogged down in politeness and power struggles.
That is a phenomenal breakdown. It really makes you reconsider how you build your own professional circles.
Yeah, it changes how you look at networking.
We naturally gravitate toward people who think like us and talk like us because it's comfortable. But comfort doesn't produce breakthroughs. If you are a visionary lead singer, the last thing you need in your business is 3 other lead singers. That just leads to a fight over the microphone.
Exactly.
You have to actively seek out your bass player. You have to find the drummer who will hold you accountable to a tempo.
And you have to prioritize that deep foundational trust over mere resume alignment. You can teach a smart person a new skill, but you cannot easily manufacture the kind of trust that allows you to survive a catastrophic failure together.
Which sets up perfectly how they actually run the daily operations of Play Bigger. Because if you were going to operate like a rock band, you can't exactly stuff yourselves into a gray cubicle farm under fluorescent lights.
No, you can't.
Oh.
And that leads us to the radical anti-corporate ethos of the firm itself. When you think of a highly successful elite strategy firm in Silicon Valley, what image comes to mind?
I mean, the McKinsey model, or Bain, or BCG.
Right.
Massive glass skyscrapers in major global cities, thousands of junior associates in tailored suits grinding away on Excel spreadsheets for 80 hours a week, a relentless, aggressive drive to expand margins, open new international offices, and take on as many clients as humanly possible.
Exactly. The industrialization of consulting. Play Bigger looked at that model and explicitly rejected every single premise of it.
Really, every premise.
The book details their absolute refusal to play the standard Silicon Valley scaling game. The entire company consists of just 4 people. The 3 founders, Al, Christopher, and Dave, and their legendary ringleader and admin, Mary Foreman.
Just 4 people.
That's it. They have stated repeatedly that they have zero intention of hiring more employees. They are not expanding globally. They categorically refuse to take venture capital money to scale the business. And they have absolutely no desire to disrupt or compete with traditional giants like McKinsey on their terms.
The visual environment the text describes is amazing, too. They don't even maintain a formal corporate office.
No, they prefer to work out of Christopher's house in Santa Cruz, California.
Which is a beach town.
The picture painted is of these guys working barefoot, wearing board shorts. They literally pause their strategic work to go surfing when the ocean swells are good. There are chickens roaming around in the backyard.
It is a deliberate, highly curated anti-aesthetic. The text characterizes them as an odd, potent hybrid. Equal parts, elite business strategists, motivational speakers, and a family of pirates who constantly drop the F-bomb to emphasize their points.
That's a perfect summary.
I have to bring up the original name for the firm because it perfectly encapsulates this chaotic energy.
That's a great detail. The ethos they ultimately settled on for the public is Play Bigger, which sounds appropriately strategic and empowering for a business book, right?
Right.
But in the early days, their absolute favorite alcohol-fueled working title for the firm was Bad Tuna.
Bad Tuna. It sounds like a punk rock band playing in a dive bar, not a strategic advisory firm charging millions of dollars.
They loved it.
Huh.
Eventually, a slightly more sober sensibility prevailed, and they realized Play Bigger communicated their actual methodology better.
Probably for the best.
But Bad Tuna didn't die. It survives to this day as their devilish alter ego.
What do you mean?
Well, when they are grinding late at night trying to solve a seemingly impossible client problem, and someone pitches an idea that is wildly inappropriate, highly radical, or completely dangerous to the status quo, they smile and say, "That's bad tuna talking."
I love that. I want to spend some serious time analyzing this, though, because on the surface, it presents a massive logical paradox.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's simulate the reality of their business. These guys are charging astronomical sums of money to consult for stuffy boards of directors, high-strung venture capitalists, and Fortune 500 CEOs.
Right.
These are environments that demand extreme deference and formal protocol. Yet Al, Christopher, and Dave show up acting like barefoot pirate surfers who curse at their clients. Logically, you would think a terrified CEO would take one look at them and fire them on the spot.
You think so?
But instead, they are in massive demand. Why? Does their fierce authenticity, their absolute refusal to wear the corporate costume, actually act as a premium differentiator?
It absolutely does, and it relies on a very specific psychological mechanism. You have to understand the psychology of authority and the desperation of the client.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When a massive corporation or a heavily funded startup calls a firm like Play Bigger, they are not looking for a 2% incremental optimization in their supply chain. They are facing an existential crisis.
They're bleeding.
They're stuck, their growth is flatlined, or they are watching a nimble competitor destroy their market share. They are desperate for a breakthrough.
Right. If you just need to audit your taxes, you hire a standard accountant in a suit. If your industry is collapsing, you need something radical.
Exactly. If a CEO hires a standard consulting firm in gray suits, those consultants are heavily incentivized to give a safe gray suit answer.
Because they want to keep the account.
The consultants want to secure the next retainer, so they will be polite, they will build a massive slide deck confirming what the CEO already suspects, and they won't rock the boat. But when Al, Christopher, and Dave walk into that boardroom barefoot, and the first thing they tell the CEO is that their current strategy is, to use their parlance expletive deleted terrible, it acts as a massive pattern interrupt.
It shocks the corporate system.
It completely short-circuits the standard power dynamic. Their unapologetic authenticity signals absolute, unshakable confidence. By refusing to wear the suit, they are implicitly sending a message. We are so elite at what we do, our insights are so transformative that we do not have to play your political games or conform to your dress code to demand your respect.
Wow, that is a power play.
For a corporate board that spends all day surrounded by sycophants and polite yes men, that level of raw, pirate-like honesty is intoxicating. It cuts through the fog. The client inherently trusts them more because they know Play Bigger isn't trying to politely flatter them into a renewed contract.
There is also an economic mechanism at play here regarding their refusal to scale, right? Because by keeping the firm to just 3 guys, they are manipulating supply and demand.
Brilliantly so. Think about the McKinsey model again. The way massive consulting firms make billions is by selling the time of hundreds of junior associates who are fresh out of business school.
Right. The partners sell a contract, but the 24-year-olds do the actual work.
Play Bigger eliminates that entirely. By staying tiny, they ensure absolute scarcity. You cannot hire Play Bigger's junior team because there is no junior team. You either get the full, undivided attention of the 3 founders or you get nobody.
And when supply is artificially capped at 3 humans, but demand from the Fortune 500 continues to rise, the price goes astronomical.
Precisely. Their anti-scaling ethos isn't just a lifestyle choice so they can go surfing. It is a highly sophisticated pricing strategy. It makes them an exclusive luxury good in the consulting world.
It really makes you realize how much power there is in defining your own rules of engagement. We are conditioned to believe that to be taken seriously, we have to mimic the behaviors of the establishment.
We all do it.
We smooth out our resumes, we wear the standard uniform, we adopt the corporate jargon. But in a sea of identical, hyper-polished professionals, unapologetic authenticity becomes a magnetic force. Even if your true self is a bit rough around the edges, a bit bad tuna, leaning into that weirdness is often a far better strategy than trying to be forgettably polished.
Totally.
You do not have to build a massive empire, manage 50 direct reports, or play the corporate political game to achieve legendary status in your field. Sometimes staying small, maintaining hyper-focus, and refusing to compromise your identity is the ultimate power move.
But that reality introduces a massive question about the book itself. If they deliberately refuse to scale their firm, if they don't want to hire associates and they don't want to take on hundreds of new clients, why did they write Play Bigger?
That's a great question.
Why spend years distilling their proprietary, highly lucrative strategic secrets into a hardcover book that anyone can buy for $30?
Which brings us to the final major theme of the introduction, which is the legacy motivation, or the concept of passing the torch.
The authors are explicit in the text that this book is absolutely not a lead generation tool. Most business books are glorified brochures.
True, a consultant writes a book hoping a CEO reads it and hires their firm.
But Play Bigger doesn't want more clients than the three of them can personally handle. Therefore, their motivation for writing the book is entirely focused on legacy and ecosystem impact. They want to give back to the entrepreneurial community that eventually embraced them.
The text actually quotes a legendary brand designer who describes Play Bigger as the heaviest lead foot on any gas pedal for startups.
I love that quote.
They want the book to serve as that acceleration mechanism for the next generation of founders, particularly those who could never dream of affording their actual consulting fees.
And this motivation connects beautifully back to Christopher Lochhead's origin story, doesn't it? The dyslexic kid who flunked out of school.
It connects in a very profound, circular way, because Christopher couldn't learn in a traditional academic environment. He literally had to teach himself how to be a businessman and a marketer.
Right. And how did he do that? By voraciously reading foundational business books.
He had to figure it out himself.
The text specifically highlights his reliance on David Ogilvy's Ogilvy on advertising and Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Christopher openly and humbly admits that if those authors had not taken the time to synthesize their knowledge into books, he would not have had a career. He would not be where he is today.
So the book is essentially a repayment of a debt.
Exactly. The Play Bigger team embarked on writing this book with the highly ambitious, explicit hope that it will become the Crossing the Chasm for the 21st century.
That's a high bar.
It is. They want to map the new territory of category design so that some other dyslexic kid or some bullied outsider sitting in a rural town right now has a lifeline to understand how to navigate and conquer the modern business world.
I want to explore what this means for the life cycle of a business leader, because it suggests that the ultimate flex in a career isn't just achieving an exit or accumulating wealth or getting on the cover of Forbes.
Right.
The ultimate flex is transitioning from a player of the game to the person who writes the rule book for how the game is played by everyone else.
That's a profound way to look at it.
How does the act of synthesizing their chaotic, pirate-like, failure-ridden experiences into a structured pedagogical framework with Kevin Manny's journalistic help essentially validate their entire life's journey?
If we look at the psychology of meaning-making, humans have a deep need to extract purpose from their suffering and their struggles.
Right, otherwise it was all for nothing.
If Al, Christopher, and Dave had just taken their millions and permanently retired to their ski houses in Tahoe, their early traumas, the pain of feeling stupid in school, the humiliation of being bullied, the agony of watching their visionary companies implode during the dot-com crash, would remain nothing more than painful memories.
Just scars.
But by taking those chaotic, disparate experiences and painstakingly synthesizing them into a teachable framework, they perform an act of alchemy.
They transform the trauma into a tool.
Exactly. They retroactively validate every misstep and every failure by essentially saying, we had to endure that specific pain, we had to be catastrophically early so that we could map the treacherous territory for you.
It aligns perfectly with the classic hero's journey in mythology.
Yes, the hero ventures into the dangerous unknown, gets battered and scarred by the dragon, but eventually returns to the village with an elixir that heals the community. In the realm of business, that elixir is synthesized knowledge.
That is an incredibly powerful way to view your own career trajectory. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind and focus purely on personal advancement.
We all do it.
But the underlying lesson here is that while you are coming up, you should absolutely be a sponge. You should consume foundational knowledge voraciously, read the texts, study the frameworks, but you must realize that your ultimate goal shouldn't end at your own success.
Your ultimate objective should be to eventually synthesize your own unique, messy, failure-laden path into something that gives back to your ecosystem.
Right. The lessons you learn from your worst failures only achieve their maximum value when you teach them to someone else, ensuring they don't have to make the exact same mistakes. You have to pass the torch to the next generation of outsiders.
It is the only mechanism by which the business ecosystem actually evolves and matures.
Well, we have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground today. We started with the friction of the outsider identity, moved through the agony of being visionary but technologically too early, deconstructed the radical candor of the rock band dynamic, explored the psychology of barefoot boardroom pirates, and ended on the hero's journey of legacy.
If I were to weave all of these distinct threads into one core, defining insight that captures the absolute soul of this introduction, it would be this.
Okay, let's hear it.
The most transformative, world-altering market strategies are almost never born in pristine, politically polite corporate boardrooms. They are forged in the trenches of adversity, born out of the ashes of spectacular mistiming, and realized through the fierce, egoless collaboration of people who fundamentally refuse to play by the establishment's rules.
It's a deeply liberating thought. It proves that to truly play bigger in business, you do not need to be born on third base with a polished resume.
Not at all.
But you do need to cultivate a deep, unflinching understanding of who you are. You have to embrace the very weirdness that makes you an outsider. Seek out your complementary bandmates who can balance your weaknesses with radical honesty, and flat out refuse to conform to a standard corporate playbook that wasn't designed for you in the first place.
Which requires a tremendous amount of courage. It is always easier and safer to put on the gray suit, hide in the middle of the org chart, and deliver the safe answer. It takes bravery to be bad tuna.
It absolutely does. We started this deep dive noting how society expects success to look like a clean, precise, unbroken line. But as we've seen by stepping into the world of Play Bigger, the reality of creating legendary companies is murky, it's messy, it's full of spectacular timing failures, F-bombs, and barefoot strategy sessions.
But that messiness isn't a defect in their model.
It is the core feature that makes the model work.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unconventional origins of the Play Bigger team. But understanding the founders is really just laying the groundwork.
It's just the beginning.
Now that you know the wild, brilliant, pirate-like minds behind these concepts, next time we're going to dive straight into the heart of their actual strategic philosophy. We are going to discover exactly what separates the standard companies that simply compete for existing market share from the legendary companies that decide to design and create entirely new worlds. Catch you on the next deep dive. What if everything you've ever been taught about building a quote-unquote better product is actually the exact thing guaranteeing that you'll lose?
It sounds completely crazy, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah, because we are so heavily conditioned to believe in this meritocracy of features. You know, the best tech always wins.
Right, like build a better mousetrap and the world beats a path to your door.
Exactly. But the data we're looking at today is just undeniable. In our current, hyper-connected world, the objectively best product actually rarely wins.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. The real winner is almost always the company that defines a completely new problem. And in doing so, they literally rewire how our brains process information.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today in this deep dive. We are looking at this huge fundamental shift in business strategy.
Moving away from just, beating the competition.
Right. Stepping entirely into the psychology of creation. We're looking closely at Chapter 2 of the source material Play Bigger, and they make this incredible case that the most legendary companies, the ones that swallow like 80% of a market's profits, they aren't playing the same game as everyone else.
Not at all. They are inventing a new game.
Yes, they lock out competitors by design, making themselves the only logical choice. So, whether you are an entrepreneur, an executive, or just someone trying to position yourself better in your career, you're about to learn why trying to be better is basically a trap.
It really is a massive trap.
Yeah.
And to understand why, I think we have to look at how we even got here, because business strategy isn't static, right? It evolves to solve whatever the specific anxiety of a given era is.
Oh, absolutely. Let's actually spend a minute on that historical context, because it completely reframes things. Like if you go back to the 1970s.
The golden age of positioning.
Right. You had thinkers like Al Ries and Jack Trout writing the literal textbooks on it. And their whole premise was about cutting through, quote unquote, overwhelming noise. But think about what noise actually meant in 1974.
It's honestly comical by today's standards.
Right. You had, 3 major TV networks?
Yeah, 3 channels and, rotary phones physically bolted to your kitchen wall.
Exactly. Newspapers and radio, and that was it. The noise was incredibly localized. So positioning was really just about maneuvering your product to take up a specific slot in an existing hierarchy.
Being the safest car on the lot or the crispest cola on the shelf.
You just accepted the market as it was and elbowed your way to the front.
And that worked perfectly for a world defined by physical scarcity. But then, you hit the 90s and the paradigm completely shifts because the technology shifts.
The microprocessor era.
Right. PCs are moving out of these weird hobbyist garages and into mainstream offices. So the strategy had to change again. This is when Geoffrey Moore introduces the concept of crossing the chasm.
Because the anxiety wasn't just noise anymore.
Exactly. It was about how you convince a normal, non-technical person to actually buy a complex piece of tech.
And then it shifted again right before the year 2000. The late 90s brought us the anxiety of disruption. Clayton Christensen's Innovators' Dilemma.
Which became the absolute gospel.
It really did. The fear was that you could be this massive, successful company doing everything right.
Listening to your customers, perfectly executing.
Right. And suddenly some scrappy startup with cheaper, maybe even inferior tech comes from below and completely destroys your market.
The anxiety of the early internet age in a nutshell.
But here is the critical pivot that the sources point out. Those older dynamics, positioning, crossing the chasm, disruption, they haven't gone away.
No, they've just been put into hyperspeed, accelerated to the point where they are almost unrecognizable. And the main engine of that acceleration is something we actually rarely stop to quantify.
The cost of creating a startup.
Yes, the absolute collapse in the cost of building tech.
Okay, this is the data point that literally stopped me in my tracks, because it explains why everything feels so exhausting today. Let's look at the year 2000, not that long ago. If you wanted to build a basic software product, it would cost you roughly $1 million.
Just to reach the starting line.
Yes, not marketing, just building it. You had to buy physical servers, put them in a data center, buy expensive software licenses.
And hire huge teams of specialized engineers just to keep it from crashing.
Exactly, $1 million, which naturally acted as this enormous barrier to entry.
It was a filter. Only a very small, well-funded group could even attempt to enter a market.
But fast forward to today. Cloud computing, AWS, open source codes, social media distribution. That $1 million cost has plummeted. Today, you can build and launch a viable product for around $10,000.
From $1 million down to $10,000, it's staggering.
It really is. And it doesn't just mean products are cheaper. It means the barrier to entry has completely evaporated.
And the consequence of that is just a market flood of biblical proportions.
Yeah.
When it's virtually free to build something, thousands of startups appear literally overnight.
A couple of developers in a coffee shop can string together some APIs.
Spin up an AWS server for pennies and launch globally with one click. We see this constant churn of companies popping up. The sources mention names like Yik Yak or Nuzzle.
They burn bright and then just fade.
Right, creating this instant, suffocating clutter for the buyer.
So it creates a fundamentally different environment. Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy because I think it helps visualize it. Imagine you're walking into a supermarket to buy cereal.
Okay.
You expect the usual stuff, right? Cheerios, Frosted Flakes. But overnight, the barrier to making cereal has dropped to 0. So you walk down the aisle, and instead of 20 choices, 10,000 new boxes have appeared on the shelves.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Right. And here's the kicker. Every single one of those 10,000 boxes has a highly optimized, flashy label claiming to be like 10% crunchier or sweeter than Cheerios.
So what happens to you, the consumer, in that aisle?
I freeze. I completely shut down. I mean, I don't have the biological energy or the time to pick up 10,000 boxes, read the ingredients, cross-reference the sugar content, and make a rational decision. I am paralyzed.
And that paralysis is the defining characteristic of the modern marketplace. Buyers, whether it's a teenager looking for an app or a massive corporate IT buyer, they cannot possibly evaluate the merits of every offering.
The noise problem is exponentially worse now.
Paralyzingly worse.
So if the buyer is completely paralyzed by 10,000 claims of being better, how does a company actually tuck through? Like if I'm launching a product tomorrow, how do I get you to pick up my box of cereal?
You don't market the cereal.
Wait, what?
You don't market the solution at all. You have to market the problem.
Okay, walk me through that. Because my immediate instinct as a founder is to scream about my cool new features.
Sure, but when the market is flooded with solutions just become cheap commodities. What is actually rare is clarity.
Clarity, okay.
Yeah. When a company steps back and perfectly articulates a problem, maybe it's a problem you didn't even know you had or a frustration you thought you just had to live with, something magical happens.
Which is?
If they can describe your problem better than you can describe it yourself, you automatically, subconsciously trust them to provide the solution.
Oh, wow.
By defining the problem, they create a new category in your mind. And that category becomes the organizing principle that saves you from that cereal aisle paralysis.
So if we have this flooded market and the buyer is paralyzed, what is physically happening in their head when someone introduces a new category? Because it clearly isn't rational analysis.
No, it absolutely is not rational. And this brings us right into the neurobiology of decision-making, which is arguably the most fascinating part of this strategy.
I love this part.
To understand category design, we have to look at cognitive psychologists. Folks like Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking, Fast and Slow, and Barry Schwartz, who wrote The Paradox of Choice.
Right, Kahneman's framework. The brain has two systems. System 1 is fast, automatic, intuitive, highly emotional.
Yeah,
And system 2 is slow, deliberate, analytical.
precisely. Now, the human brain consumes a massive amount of energy. Roughly 20% of our daily calories just go to keeping the brain running.
Just to think.
Right. So biologically, the brain is an energy conservation machine. It hates using System 2.
Because analytical thinking burns too many calories.
Exactly. It's exhausting. When a buyer is faced with 10,000 software startups, they cannot engage System 2. They would literally collapse from cognitive fatigue.
So to survive the overload, our brains rely on cognitive shortcuts. We use System 1 to categorize things, put them into neat mental boxes so we don't have to actually think about them anymore.
Exactly. Category design isn't just a clever marketing trick. It is an architectural alignment with human neurobiology.
Yeah.
We are hacking the brain's biological need to categorize.
And the text outlines 3 specific cognitive biases that make this happen, right? Which completely dismantle the whole myth that the better product wins.
Yes. Let's dig into those, because this is where the traditional playbook just gets thrown out the window. The first mechanism is the anchoring effect.
The anchoring effect.
Yeah, it's our neurological tendency to rely heavily on the very first piece of information we receive about a topic.
The first data point becomes the anchor.
Right, the reference point against which all subsequent information is judged. In business, the first company that successfully defines a new category plants the flag in the consumer's brain. They get anchored as the gold standard.
And the data on this is wild. The brand that gets anchored first doesn't just get a head start. They capture permanent, outsized value. They routinely get twice the long-term market share of the runner-up.
Because once that anchor is set, those neural pathways are established, and they are brutally difficult for a competitor to change.
Because if you come in second, you aren't evaluated on your own merits anymore.
Nope. You are only evaluated in relation to the anchor. You're forcing the buyer to use their slow, exhausting System 2 brain to compare you to the standard they already accepted.
And the brain just resists that. Exactly.
Which bleeds perfectly into the second bias. And this one is my absolute favorite because I'm so deeply guilty of it.
Oh, we all are.
It's the choice supportive bias. It's the idea that once a consumer makes a choice, their brain actively assigns positive qualities to that choice just to defend the decision.
Yes.
Like, I remember years ago, I bought this early smart home device. It was incredibly buggy. It disconnected constantly. The interface was a nightmare. But whenever friends came over, I would fiercely defend it.
You'd point out the one time it worked.
Yes, I would show them how it turned off a light once and totally ignore the 50 times it failed. I was doing free PR for a terrible product just so I didn't look stupid for buying it.
That is choice supportive bias in a nutshell. It's a psychological defense mechanism against cognitive dissonance.
Nobody wants to feel like they made a bad decision.
Especially when they're spending big money or staking their professional reputation on a purchase. Once you buy into the category king, your brain actively works to prove you made the safe, smart decision. So you literally become blind to a competitor's features. They could release something objectively better, and your brain just filters it out to protect your ego.
Yes. This is exactly why superior tech can, and routinely does, completely lose a category war. Once a king emerges, customers genuinely believe it's the best, regardless of empirical evidence.
Okay, but I need to push back on this with some teeth.
Let's hear it.
Let's really test this premise. Say I'm the category king. I defined the problem. I anchored the market. But a competitor comes along a year later. And let's say their product isn't just marginally better. Let's say it's objectively, mathematically twice as fast and half the price.
Okay.
Are you seriously telling me that an intelligent IT buyer or a rational consumer will look at those hard facts, the massive cost savings, and their brain will just reject the better product?
Yes, I'm telling you exactly that.
Really?
Because your hypothetical assumes human beings make purchasing decisions based on mathematical logic. We don't. We make them based on biological safety.
Biological safety.
Which brings us to the third bias, groupthink or conformity bias. We are pack animals at our core. For hundreds of thousands of years, straying from the pack meant you got eaten by a predator. We are hardwired to seek safety in numbers.
So how does that play out in like an MRI machine? Because there is actual imaging backing this up.
There is. Researchers put subjects in functional MRI machines. They present them with a scenario where their personal opinion differs from the group's consensus.
And what happens?
Their brains literally produce an error signal. It registers in the amygdala as a physical threat. It causes anxiety. The brain is screaming, "You are separated from the herd, you are in danger."
That's terrifying.
But when those same subjects conform to the group's decision, the error signal stops. And the reward centers of the brain, the dopamine areas, literally light up.
Wait, so buying the popular thing, choosing the established category king, literally triggers a chemical reward in the brain.
Precisely. We buy from category kings because it chemically feels good. We feel safer and happier when we align with the herd.
So when a startup founder tries to sell a better, faster, cheaper product against a category king, they aren't just fighting a marketing budget.
No, you are fighting human evolution. You are asking your buyer to endure a neurological error signal, to feel threatened, just to save a few dollars. People want to fit in. Choosing the king is the ultimate way to blend in with the safe crowd.
If I'm listening to this right now, the implication is just massive. Stop fighting the brain's biological need to categorize. If you can define the category first and anchor that problem in the buyer's mind, human psychology basically becomes your free marketing department.
It is the ultimate asymmetrical competitive advantage. Leverage the cognitive shortcuts instead of trying to overcome them with brute force feature comparisons.
Okay, but knowing the psychology is only half the battle, because how long does it actually take to pull this off? To rewire a market's brain?
That is the million-dollar question.
And we have data on this, right? The authors looked at a massive study. Let's look at the financial reality of when these category kings actually emerge.
Right, so we move from theory to rigorous data science here. There's this comprehensive study of U.S. venture capital-backed tech startups founded between 2000 and 2015.
Thousands of companies.
Thousands, tracking their founding dates, funding, IPOs, and their post-IPO market cap.
And the goal was to find a pattern. When do these companies establish that king shit and start generating insane value?
And the data reveals a stunningly specific window. It's called the 610 law. The analysis found that the absolute sweet spot for a company to go public and generate sustainable value is when the company is between 6 and 10 years old.
And what I found so counterintuitive about this is what didn't matter.
The funding.
Exactly. The amount of private VC money raised beforehand had zero correlation to long-term success. None. You could raise 10 million or 150 million, and it did not predict your post-IPO value. The only consistent factor was the age of the company.
To understand why that 6 to 10-year window is so rigid, we have to look at the economic life cycle of a category. There is a model by an economist named Paul Gorosky, the category life cycle model.
Okay, let's visualize this.
Imagine a graph. X-axis is time. Y-axis has two lines, the number of competing companies and the total market value of a space.
Got it.
Early on, the first few years, you're in the define phase. A visionary identifies a new problem. The market starts waking up. Suddenly, the number of competing vendors spikes aggressively.
Everyone rushes in to solve the new problem.
Exactly. Dozens of startups fighting for oxygen. But the overall market value of the category is still low because the general public hasn't adopted the behavior yet.
So it's this brutal environment, a bunch of scrappy companies violently fighting over a very small pie.
Yes. But then, right in the middle of this model, around that 6 to 10-year mark, a violent shift occurs. The lines on the graph cross.
What happens?
The number of competing companies dives sharply. A clear category king emerges, establishes the anchor, and sucks up all the economics. The competitors starve and die off.
And the market value.
Simultaneously, it explodes like a rocket. The pie gets massive, and the king eats almost all of it. That crossing point is the moment of category explosion.
But this brings up a huge question for me. Why does this explosion consistently happen at the 6 to 10-year mark? Like, why doesn't a brilliant founder with $100 million just force the explosion at year 2? Or why doesn't it take 15 years?
Because you cannot buy a shortcut through human biology.
It goes back to the brain.
Right back to the brain science. Changing human behavior, rewiring how a society thinks about a problem, establishing new neural pathways. That is an incredibly slow biological process. You cannot rush brain plasticity.
So no matter how many ads you buy, the brain physically needs time to process the change.
Precisely. It takes years for a critical mass of people to shift their thinking, recognize the old way as a problem, and safely adopt a new buying behavior. For a simple consumer app, maybe it's 6 years. For complex enterprise software, it might be 10.
But you can't bypass the biological time required to change minds.
You really can't.
If I'm an entrepreneur listening, the reality check here is immense. Category design is not a sprint, it's an ultra marathon. You have to align your financial runway so you don't run out of cash in year 4, right in the middle of the valley of death.
Before the explosion.
Exactly. But more importantly, you have to align your emotional endurance. You have to strap in for a 6 to 10-year battle to slowly change how people think. You can't launch on Tuesday and expect to be king on Thursday.
It requires sustained, often grueling effort to educate the market, and patience that most modern business cultures simply do not encourage.
Which naturally leads us to execution. Let's say I have the emotional stamina and the runway. How do I actually survive that journey? How do I ensure I'm the one wearing the crown when those lines cross?
To pull that off, you need a framework. And the concept here is called the magic triangle, or sometimes the three-legged bar stool.
The magic triangle.
The premise is that to win the category, you can't just focus on what you're building. You must simultaneously design 3 distinct elements: a great product, a great company, and a great category.
Okay, I want to use a metaphor here to make this tangible, because it's easy to just nod along to product, company, category without getting the mechanics. Let's imagine you're trying to build a brand new sovereign nation from scratch.
I like this. Let's run with it.
So the product is your infrastructure. The roads, the bridges, the plumbing. It has to function perfectly or people can't live there.
Right.
The company is your government and culture, the laws, the economy, how citizens treat each other. It dictates how the nation sustains itself.
And the category.
The category is the borders. It's the flag. It's the shared identity that explains to the rest of the world why this nation exists in the first place and why it's fundamentally different from the country next door.
That is a brilliant way to frame it.
Yeah.
Because this is where so many visionary engineers fail spectacularly. They focus entirely on product design, building the most advanced roads and bridges.
Maybe some company design too, a good culture.
Sure, but if you ignore category design, if you don't draw the borders and define the identity, you've built a pristine infrastructure in the middle of an unrecognizable wilderness. Nobody knows it's there, nobody knows why they should visit.
And the whole stool falls over?
Exactly. You must execute on all 3 simultaneously. You have to build the roads while telling the world why this new nation needs to exist.
And there's no better way to illustrate the devastating consequences of ignoring the magic triangle than looking at a real historical collision. The ultimate case study from the text. Microsoft versus Apple in the tablet space.
Oh, this is a classic.
We have to go back to the year 2002. Bill Gates takes the stage and proudly announces the Microsoft tablet PC.
And we really need to analyze how Gates approached this. He approached it entirely as a product design exercise, driven by his existing assets. The authors describe it as a hammer looking for a nail.
Microsoft's hammer being the Windows operating system.
Right. So Gates forces Windows XP, heavy bloated desktop OS designed for a mouse and keyboard, onto a portable screen. And he expects people to navigate it with this clunky stylus.
He didn't rethink the experience at all. He just shrunk a laptop, ripped off the keyboard, and said, here. He was fundamentally trying to make a better laptop.
And he was so confident, he predicted it would be the most popular form of PC within 5 years.
But it was a catastrophic failure. Nobody bought it because nobody understood the problem it was supposed to solve. It was too heavy for bed, battery life was terrible, the stylus was frustrating. He completely failed to create a new category because he didn't draw any new borders.
Now, fast forward 8 years, 2010, the tablet is largely considered a dead end. But Steve Jobs takes the stage to unveil the iPad.
And the specific language he uses here is a masterclass.
It really is. I want everyone to pay attention to his framing. He doesn't walk out and say, we built a better laptop. He doesn't say, here's a larger smartphone.
No. He does something so subtle but profound. He puts up a massive slide. On the left is an iPhone. On the right is a MacBook. And right in the middle, a giant question mark. He explicitly asks the audience, is there room for a third category of device in the middle?
He anchors the word category immediately.
Yes, he positioned it as a completely distinct space. He explains the rules of this new nation. He says, to justify its existence, it has to be better at a few key tasks than either a phone or a laptop. Browsing the web, viewing photos, watching video.
He creates the paradigm of couch surfing.
Exactly. He didn't just sell the glass and aluminum, he sold a new conceptual space of intimate, relaxed, mobile media consumption. He designed the category perfectly in tandem with the product.
And the results speak for themselves. While the tablet PC languished, Apple sold 15 million iPads in its first year. Jobs wasn't fighting a better war against PC makers. He refused to play on their field. He fought a different war.
Different versus better is the crux of this whole philosophy. And it doesn't just apply to trillion-dollar tech giants. It applies to consumer goods, too. Let's look at Manoj Bhargava and the story of 5-hour energy.
Oh, this is a fantastic story about manipulating physical space to create a category.
Tell us how it happened.
So Bhargava is wandering a natural products trade show in Anaheim, California. He stops at a booth and tries this new energy concoction. Now, at the time, the energy drink market is exploding, but it's dominated by 16-ounce cans. Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar.
Right.
Bhargava realizes these drinks taste objectively terrible. But more importantly, he has a profound strategic insight. He realizes that by selling a 16-ounce can of liquid, these companies are forcing themselves to compete directly in the massive beverage category.
They're competing against Coca-Cola, bottled water, Starbucks.
Exactly. And Bhargava asks himself a brilliant, clarifying question.
If I'm tired, am I also thirsty?
That is the moment of category creation right there.
Yeah. It's a total reframing of the problem. Why force someone to choke down a huge volume of bad-tasting liquid just for an energy boost? Instead of making a better-tasting energy drink in a cooler can, he decides to create a completely different category. He strips out all the water. He creates the 2-ounce energy shot.
And crucially, this isn't just a product innovation. It is a category execution. Because think about where he sells it.
This is the genius part. He refuses to put it in the refrigerated beverage aisle next to the sodas and Red Bulls. He knows he'll get crushed there. He demands that retailers place 5-hour energy completely separately in a little cardboard display right at the cash register.
Next to the chewing gum and the chapstick.
Yes. He literally manipulated the physical architecture of the grocery store to enforce his new category borders.
He designed the product, 2 ounces, no refrigeration. He designed the company highly profitable, incredibly lean. And he designed the category, the quick energy shot, entirely uncoupled from the concept of thirst.
By aligning the magic triangle, he achieved total dominance. By 2011, he commanded 90% of the energy shot market.
So I have a direct question for you, the listener, right now. Look at whatever project you are working on. Are you currently exhausting yourself trying to win a better war? Or are you boldly fighting a different war?
Because better relies on someone else's rules. If you're fighting to be better, you're constantly comparing yourself to the established king, begging for incremental margins.
But different. Different lets you write your own rules entirely. The overarching lesson is that you must never build your product in a vacuum. You have to construct the conceptual space around your product so it stands alone, devoid of direct comparison.
You don't want to be the best alternative in a crowded room. You want to be the only choice in a new room you just built.
Exactly. But there is a final critical step to all of this. Once you build that new room, what happens next? The texts are emphatic about this. A category demands a king.
It does. And sometimes companies stumble into category design accidentally. They build something cool, not realizing the magnitude of the problem they're solving. But the market's reaction proves how desperately consumers want a single leader to guide them.
I want to look at Google to explain this because I think a lot of people misunderstand Google's history.
I always thought Google was just the classic example of building a better search engine. The story is Alta Vista and Lycos were terrible. Google built a better algorithm, so they won.
It's a common misconception. But looking through the lens of this text, it was profound category design. Let's break down what actually happened. It's true. Larry Page and Sergey Brin had a generational tech insight.
PageRank.
Right. Early search engines were primitive keyword crawlers. They just scanned the web to see how many times a word appeared. The results were terrible, heavily spammed, and crucially, they couldn't figure out how to monetize the traffic. They relied on selling clunky banner ads nobody clicked.
And then Page and Brin treat web links as votes, delivering vastly superior results.
Yes, the product was significantly better. But if they had stopped there, if they just remained a really good search tool without a business model, they would have just been a better product.
Microsoft or Yahoo probably would have just bought them for a few million bucks.
Exactly. What elevated Google into a legendary category king was that they completely redefined the category of advertising. They invented AdWords.
Oh, right.
Instead of selling random banner ads based on vague demographics, they created an auction system based entirely on real-time user intent. Think about how revolutionary that is. When you type a search query, you are telling them exactly what you want at that exact second. Google harnessed that intent and let advertisers bid on it.
They created a brand new category of information meets advertising. It was so radically different, it broke all the old models. And the cash generated from that specific category design is what funded their total domination. Maps, Gmail, Android.
They didn't just win a search war, they defined the economic engine of the internet. And we see this dynamic of the market demanding a king even more starkly in enterprise software. Let's look at VMware.
A story of accidental category creation that turned into a multi-billion-dollar empire.
The founders were Diane Green and Mendel Rosenblum. They were literally just building a niche tool for researchers.
They built software to partition a single physical computer into multiple isolated environments. The goal was modest. Let researchers test code without crashing their primary machine.
They called it virtualization. They had no idea they were sitting on a gold mine. So they finish a workable version and casually post online for a 30-day free trial on a Sunday afternoon.
And by Monday morning, a student at Cornell University emails them frantically. He says, hey, your website is down because the server I'm hosting it on just crashed. 75,000 people tried to download your software overnight.
75,000 people for a niche research tool. Why?
Because the corporate market had a massive unarticulated problem.
Yes. IT departments were spending billions on physical servers, but the servers were running at maybe 10% capacity, a colossal waste of money and space.
And the exact moment VMware offered a named solution to this problem, the ability to run multiple servers on one piece of hardware, the market went insane.
The market aggressively pulled the product out of their hands. Consumers didn't wait for VMware to formulate a marketing plan. The market crowned them king on the spot and drag them to success.
Okay, I have to push back here.
Yeah.
And I want to push back hard.
Go for it.
We hear so much about the dangers of monopolies. We have antitrust laws for a reason. Isn't fierce competition supposed to be the bedrock of a healthy capitalist system? Why does a category need a king? Why are you suggesting it's actually a good thing for one company to ruthlessly take 80% of a market?
It's a vital distinction, and it depends entirely on the maturity of the market. Let's look at a mature market like commercial airlines or frozen foods. In those spaces, the category is already defined. We all know what a flight is. In those cases, fierce competition is absolutely good. It drives down prices and benefits the consumer.
Right. I want airlines fighting over my ticket price.
But a brand new category is an entirely different psychological environment. When a category is in its infancy, people are confused. They're dealing with that paralyzing noise, that cognitive fatigue. In the early stages of a new paradigm, consumers don't want to race to the bottom on price.
They want safety.
They want safety. They want a visionary leader to step up, establish the rules, define the tech standards, and give them a safe, reliable choice to commit to.
They basically want a dictator to bring order to the chaos.
Essentially, yes. If a strong king does not emerge to set the standard, the category often stalls and dies. The confusion remains too high, the perceived risk is too great, and the mainstream public just reverts to their old habits out of self-preservation.
So, if you are an innovator, if you've done the hard work to define a new space, you actually have a moral and strategic responsibility to your customers to lead it definitively. You can't be shy about dominance. You have to plant the flag, or the entire category collapses.
Precisely. You have to own the problem completely, unapologetically.
So let's bring all of this down to earth. What does this actually mean for you listening right now, tomorrow morning, when you go back to work?
Whether you are pitching a new software feature, a physical product, or just pitching yourself for a promotion.
Exactly. Trying to prove you are simply 10% better, faster, or harder working than the next option is exhausting. And as we've seen from the brain science, it's usually entirely futile.
If we synthesize the absolute soul of this discussion, it comes down to this. Category design is ultimately the most powerful cognitive hack in business. You are not merely engineering a product, you are engineering human perception itself.
By aligning the magic triangle product, company, and category, you bypass the brain's defense mechanisms against noise.
You give the world a new problem to care about, and in return, the world gives you its undivided loyalty and the lion's share of the economics.
It fundamentally changes how you view success. You stop looking at competitors as enemies to be beaten, and you start looking at the market's unarticulated problems as empty spaces waiting to be claimed.
I will leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. We often look back at historical visionaries, people like Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Thomas Edison, and we assume their dominance was inevitable. We assume they just had better tech or smarter engineers or magical intuition.
Right, they're just geniuses.
But think about this, based on what we've unpacked today. What if their true genius wasn't in computer science or logistics at all? What if their defining genius was simply understanding the biological limits of the human brain?
Wow.
What if they just mastered the anchoring effect and the choice supportive bias better than anyone else in history? Because if that is true, it means their legendary success isn't magic. It isn't unrepeatable. It's a biological formula, a structural framework that you can learn, adapt, and replicate.
It really makes you wonder, if you were to stop competing tomorrow, if you were to drop the exhausting battle of trying to be the best cereal on a crowded shelf, what entirely new aisle could you build? What category could you be the king of? We're going to leave you to mull that over, because next time on the deep dive, we're going to roll up our sleeves and look at the exact step-by-step playbook for how to discover a brand new category hiding right under your nose. You won't want to miss it. So picture this. It's the fall of 2002.
Okay.
And Bill Gates is walking out onto this massive stage in Las Vegas.
Right, at Combic, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The huge Comdex technology trade show. And, I mean, you have to remember, Gates is at the absolute peak of his power here.
Oh, untouchable.
Totally untouchable. Microsoft is this massive monopoly, and he's holding this prototype in his hands, right?
Yeah.
And he is completely convinced it's going to change the world.
A very bold claim.
Right. So he holds it up. It's this screen, maybe like the size of a legal pad, and he's got this little plastic stylus.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And he just proudly announces the Microsoft tablet PC.
Here we go.
And he actually gets on stage and confidently predicts that within 5 years, this is going to be the most popular form of computing in America.
I mean, you can see why he thought that.
Sure. He had unlimited capital, right? He had like the smartest engineers on the planet and a total monopoly.
Yeah, all the advantages.
But the product was just an absolute unmitigated disaster.
Total failure.
Yeah. I mean, consumers completely ignored it. Developers actively hated it. And it just vanished.
Just POF. Gone.
Right. And you have to ask why. And it's because Bill Gates fell for what is basically the ultimate capitalist fairy tale, you know.
Little better mousetrap thing.
Exactly. The myth that if you build a better mousetrap, the world is just going to automatically beat a path to your door.
Which is just not how the brain works.
Right. So today, that's what we're digging into.
Right.
We are looking at the cold, hard data and, the actual biological chemistry of the human brain to explain exactly why just being better is basically a guaranteed way to lose.
Yeah, and it's honestly the hardest habit for any professional to break.
Oh, totally.
Because if you think about it, from the time we're in elementary school, we are graded on this linear scale of better.
Right. Better grades, better scores.
Exactly. Better test scores, better athletic performance, eventually better quarterly earnings. So when we try to build a business or launch a product, we naturally look at what already exists. And we try to make it like 10% faster or maybe 20% cheaper.
Or it's marginally sleeker.
Yeah, but you look at the landscape of the really legendary world-changing successes, none of them operated on that scale.
None of them.
They realized early on that competing on the axis of better is just a death sentence because you're fighting on someone else's turf.
Which perfectly brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We are unpacking Chapter 3 of our source material, specifically pages 34 to 53.
Yes.
And this section operates on one really central, just paradigm-shifting premise, and that is category is the new strategy.
Such a huge concept.
It really is. So for anyone listening right now, whether you're a founder trying to get your startup funded, or maybe you're an executive trying to pivot this legacy brand, or, you're just somebody who's fascinated by the hidden machinery of how titans like Apple and Google manipulate markets.
Right, because it really is manipulation in a way.
Yeah, this is going to give you an entirely new framework. We are going to decode how modern empires aren't built by fighting for market share. They are built by inventing the market entirely.
Inventing the game. And to really grasp the mechanics of this, we're going to trace the historical evolution of corporate strategy. We'll unpack the specific cognitive biases that dictate how humans actually buy things.
The brain science stuff is so cool.
It's fascinating. And we'll look at the timeline of how long it actually takes to force a society to change its habits.
Yeah.
Because in this era of just infinite choice, category creation isn't a clever marketing trick.
Right.
It is genuinely the only reliable economic imperative we have left.
Okay, so let's wind the clock back a bit, because the first thing our source material really digs into is that the old strategic playbooks aren't just like tired, they are fundamentally obsolete.
Completely broken for today's world.
Yeah. And it helps to understand what world those old playbooks were actually designed for, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at the 1970s.
Okay, the 70s. So the 1970s gave birth to this strategic era that was defined by a concept called positioning.
Positioning, right?
Yeah, the seminal thinkers here were Al Ries and Jack Trout. And the core idea of positioning was figuring out how to, like, wedge your product into the mind of the consumer relative to your competitors.
Right, like that famous Avis car rental campaign.
Exactly. Avis positioned itself against Hertz with that slogan, "We're number two, so we try harder."
Which was brilliant at the time.
It was. But you have to remember the physical friction of the economy in the 1970s.
Right.
I mean, there were basically 3 broadcast television networks in America.
Just 3 channels.
People were buying things out of the Sears catalog. Telephones were literally bolted to kitchen walls.
Right, right. The barrier to entry for any business was just astronomical.
Huge.
Like, if you wanted to start a shoe company in 1975, you needed a physical factory. You needed a whole fleet of delivery trucks.
You needed warehouse distribution deals.
Exactly. And you needed enough capital to buy these insanely expensive 30-second ad spots on CBS or NBC just to, like, let people know you even existed.
Right. And because competition was so geographically and physically constrained, positioning worked beautifully.
It made sense.
Yeah, you just needed to figure out how to be a little bit better or a little bit different than the 2 other guys sitting on the store shelf.
Because there were only 2 other guys.
Exactly.
Okay.
But then, we move into the 1990s, the personal computer revolution happens, and the strategic milestone becomes this concept known as crossing the chasm, which was popularized by Jeffrey Moore.
Oh, this one is just legendary in Silicon Valley. It's all about that adoption curve, right?
Yes. So Moore basically identified that introducing a highly complex technical product to the market involves this bell curve of adoption.
Okay.
You have your early adopters. These are the tech enthusiasts who will buy, like, a super buggy piece of software just because it's new and shiny.
Right. They just want to tinker with it.
But then there is this massive, terrifying gap, the chasm between those early adopters and the early majority.
Right. The mainstream folks.
Yeah, the early majority are just pragmatic business people. They don't care about the tech. They just want a solution to their problem. So the entire strategy of the 90s was figuring out how to translate complex technical jargon into pragmatic business value.
So you could jump over that chasm and finally hit the mainstream.
Exactly.
Okay, and then right on the heels of that, in 1997, Clayton Christensen drops the Innovators dilemma.
A classic.
Yeah, which basically gives us the modern concept of disruption. I always think of the steel industry example that Christensen used.
Oh, the mini mills.
Yeah, the mini mills. So you had these massive integrated steel mills making these highly profitable, really top-tier products.
Right.
But then these scrappy little mini mills came along from the bottom of the market. And they started by making really cheap, low-quality rebar, the kind of stuff the big guys didn't even want to bother with because the margins were so bad.
Right. They ignored them.
Exactly. But slowly, the mini mills kept improving their technology until they were making sheet metal, and they completely gutted the incumbents from below.
It is a brilliant framework. It really is.
Yeah.
The problem is our source text points out that while positioning and crossing the chasm and disruption are still, vital concepts to know there.
Sure.
The underlying physics of the business world have shifted so radically that applying them in isolation just doesn't work anymore.
Right.
We are now deeply entrenched in the mobile, social, and cloud era. And the source material highlights this specific data point that I think perfectly illustrates this phase shift.
Oh, the barrier to entry math? Yeah, drop this on them. It's wild.
Okay, so in the year 2000, if you want to bring a viable technology product to market, it cost roughly $1 million.
$1 million, just to start.
Yes. You had to buy physical servers, you had to lease office space, you had to buy massive software licenses. By 2015, largely due to things like Amazon Web Services, open source software, digital distribution, that cost had plummeted to roughly $10,000.
That is just... It's a 100-fold decrease in the barrier to entry.
It's unbelievable.
And I want you, the listener, to really think about what happens to a society when the cost of creation drops to almost zero.
Yeah.
Like when a kid in a dorm room can spin up a global software platform for the price of a used Honda Civic, the market doesn't just get crowded, it
Yeah,
gets completely overwhelmingly flooded.
flooded. And that extreme drop in friction created what the text calls a crisis of choice.
A crisis of choice. I love that phrasing.
Consumers today are bombarded with an infinite number of unrecognizable brand names,
Huh.
endless feature lists, just an ocean of solutions for every conceivable micro-specific problem.
It's too much, and that sensory overload is basically the defining characteristic of our modern economy.
Totally.
Like, think about going to the grocery store in, say, 1980 to buy a beer. You walk down the aisle, and you essentially had three choices. You had Budweiser, Miller, or Coors.
Right.
The cognitive load was zero. You just grabbed a six-pack and you went home.
Easy.
Now, walk into the craft beer aisle of a premium modern supermarket.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It spans like 40 feet. There are literally hundreds of cans. They have these bizarre neon artworks, psychedelic names, imperial stouts, hazy IPAs, double dry hopped pale ales.
It's exhausting.
It is. You stand there completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of options because you don't want to make the wrong choice.
Right.
So what do? You often just grab the one with the coolest label, or you revert back to something safe that you've had before.
And see, that paralysis in the beer aisle isn't just a minor annoyance. It actually triggers a very specific, deeply ingrained biological defense mechanism.
This is where it gets crazy.
Because the human brain is faced with a volume of information it literally cannot process. It simply stops trying to evaluate every solution on its individual merit.
That just gives up.
Yeah, it takes way too much caloric energy.
Mm.
So the brain relies on categorization. Winning companies today understand that you cannot market a solution to an overwhelmed brain.
Right.
You have to market the problem.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that. Marketing the problem instead of the solution.
Yeah, so if you come to an overwhelmed consumer and you say, look at all these amazing features my software has, their brain literally shuts down.
It's just more noise.
Exactly. But if you come to them and articulate a problem they've been struggling with, perhaps one they couldn't even put into words yet,
Oh, that's powerful.
you instantly categorize their anxiety. And once you clearly define and name that problem, the consumer's brain instinctively looks for the category leader to provide the answer.
Which brings us to the psychology of all this. Because why do we automatically default to the leader of a category?
Right. Why do we do that?
It would be so easy to say that consumers are just lazy, that they don't want to read product reviews. But the text leans heavily into the work of cognitive scientists, particularly Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman.
Oh, Kahneman's work is brilliant.
Yeah, to show that this behavior is literally hardwired into our biology, Kahneman's work on System 1 and System 2 thinking basically proves that our brains use cognitive shortcuts or biases just to survive.
We simply have to use those shortcuts. I mean, if you meticulously analyzed every single micro decision you made from the moment you woke up.
Like what toothpaste has the absolute best fluoride ratio?
Exactly. Or what specific route to work has the statistically lowest accident rate on a Tuesday.
Right.
If you did that, your brain would exhaust its entire energy supply by 9:00 a.m.
You'd pass out.
Pretty much.
Why?
So let's look at the specific biases that category kings exploit, starting with the anchoring effect.
Oh, anchoring is fascinating. It's the psychological phenomenon where the first piece of information you receive fundamentally warps your perception of everything that comes after it.
Yes.
You see this all the time in like real estate or car negotiations.
Oh, absolutely.
If a car dealer throws out an initial price of $40,000, that number drops an anchor in your brain. If you negotiate them down to $35,000, you feel like you won, right?
Yeah, you feel like a genius.
Even if the car is intrinsically only worth $30,000.
Right.
In the context of business strategy, the first company to clearly define a problem and propose a new category drops a cognitive anchor.
A massive anchor.
Yeah, so every subsequent competitor isn't evaluated on a blank slate. They are just seen as a derivative of the anchor.
Exactly. If you establish the category, you establish the metrics by which everyone else is judged.
Right.
Now, the second bias the text highlights is the choice supportive bias.
Okay.
This is the psychological tendency to retroactively ascribe positive attributes to an option simply because we committed to it.
Oh, man. I know exactly how this works because I've lived it.
Really?
Yeah. The second I finally decided to switch from an iPhone to an Android phone, I noticed this bizarre shift in my own behavior.
What happened?
I found myself on Reddit forums aggressively defending Android operating systems against Apple users.
That's hilarious.
And the crazy part was, I was completely ignoring the fact that my new phone's battery life was objectively worse.
Wow.
I was experiencing massive cognitive dissonance, right?
Precisely. The human brain completely despises cognitive dissonance. It hates the feeling of being wrong or having made a suboptimal choice.
Yeah.
So once a consumer commits to a category leader, their brain acts as a defense attorney.
A defense attorney. I love that.
They actively convince themselves it was the absolute best choice.
Mhm.
So if a competitor comes out a year later with a product that has technically superior specs, a better camera, a faster processor, the consumer's brain will find a way to dismiss those facts.
They'll just say, oh, those new features are just gimmicks.
Exactly. Or they'll say they're unnecessary.
Yeah.
Because admitting they don't have the best product makes them feel insecure.
So if you are a startup and you're trying to beat an established category king by just having slightly better specs,
Yeah.
you aren't just fighting their massive marketing budget. You are fighting the defense mechanisms of millions of individual human egos.
It is a nearly impossible battle. You really can't win it.
Wow.
But the most powerful bias discussed in the source material, like the one that truly builds empires, is groupthink bias.
Right.
This is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history as pack animals. The text references these specific functional MRI studies of the human brain during decision-making.
Okay.
When a person holds an opinion or makes a choice that differs from the majority of the group they are in, their amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, literally produces an error signal.
An error signal.
It floods their system with stress hormones.
Sure.
It is a biological warning that they are isolated and in physical danger.
Because, I mean, if you're on the prehistoric savannah and you disagree with the tribe and wander off alone.
You get eaten by a lion.
Exactly. Isolation meant death.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Conversely, when researchers observed people making choices that aligned with the consensus of the group,
Yeah.
the reward centers of their brains just lit up. They received a massive hit of dopamine. We are biologically incentivized to agree with the crowd.
That makes so much sense.
In a chaotic, noisy modern market, the brain is desperately seeking safety. When we buy the industry standard software or we use the ride-sharing app that everyone else uses, our brains feel secure.
We blend in.
We blend in. We are safe from criticism if the product fails because, hey, everyone else is using it too.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second, though.
Sure.
I'm looking at my notes, and I'm thinking about what feels like a glaring exception to this rule. What about Zoom?
Okay, Zoom.
Right, because before the pandemic, we had Skype, which was essentially the category king of internet calling.
Yes, it was.
And we had Cisco WebEx for corporate meetings. They were the established, safe consensus choices.
Right.
But Zoom came out of nowhere, essentially pitched itself as better, less glitchy video calling, and they absolutely crushed the incumbents. Doesn't that prove that building a better mousetrap actually works?
See, it looks like that on the surface. But if you dig into the mechanics of what Zoom actually did, it is a masterclass in category design, not just product improvement.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. Skype was anchored in the consumer category. It was what you used to call your grandparents on a Sunday.
Okay, yeah.
WebEx was anchored in legacy enterprise. It required downloads, passwords, IT permissions, a massive amount of friction.
Oh, I remember. It was awful.
Zoom didn't just market better video quality. Eric Yuan, the founder, defined a completely new space.
Frictionless enterprise video.
Frictionless.
Their real category innovation was making the hyperlink the product. You didn't need an account, you clicked a link, and you were instantly in the room.
Oh, wow.
They didn't build a better Skype. They created a space where the historical friction of joining a meeting just dropped to zero. They changed the paradigm of how people expected to interact with the software.
That makes perfect sense. They changed the expectation of the user, which created a totally new baseline.
Exactly.
So the practical takeaway for you, the listener, is clear. Relying on technical superiority, being marginally faster, having a slightly slicker user interface, is a losing battle against millions of years of human evolutionary biology.
You have to become the consensus choice that provides psychological safety.
But, and this is big, but changing the biological and psychological defaults of a mass market does not happen quickly.
Wow.
Which leads us to the timeline of category creation. You cannot issue a clever press release on a Monday and expect to be a category king by Friday.
Right. Let's look at the hard data the authors provide on this, because they analyzed an enormous data set of every technology initial public offering, every tech IPO between the years 2000 and 2015.
A massive data set.
Yeah, and they were looking for the specific moment in a company's lifespan where the most massive amount of market value is generated. And they found this undeniable mathematical sweet spot.
And what the data showed was that the optimal window for a company to go public to really capture the lion's share of category value is when the company is between 6 and 10 years old.
6 to 10 years.
Yeah.
That completely shatters the whole Silicon Valley mythological narrative.
Oh, totally.
Because the media loves to tell the story of, like, the genius coder who writes an app in their dorm room over the weekend, gets funded on Tuesday, and is a billionaire by the following spring.
It's a great story, but it's a myth.
The data proves that narrative is largely an illusion.
It takes nearly a decade to rewire human behavior. And to explain the mechanics of why it takes this long, the text brings in a framework called Paul Jarosky's category lifecycle model.
Okay.
Imagine a graph tracking a new market over time. On the vertical axis, you are tracking two different metrics simultaneously.
Okay, I'm picturing here.
You're tracking the total financial value of the category, and you're tracking the number of competing companies trying to win it.
Got it. So at year 0, somebody identifies a new problem. What happens?
Well, in those first few years, the line representing the number of competing vendors explodes straight up.
Because everybody wants in.
Exactly. Everyone rushes into the space trying to figure out the solution. It is the Wild West. But if you look at the other line, the total market capitalization or actual revenue being generated, it remains incredibly flat.
Slat.
There is a lot of noise, a lot of venture capital being burned, but the mainstream public hasn't adopted the behavior yet.
Because the market is highly fragmented, consumers are confused, they don't know who to trust, so they just wait.
Exactly, they wait it out. But then, as you approach that middle phase around year 6 to 8, this violent shift occurs.
Lines cross.
The lines cross, the category finally firmly takes hold in the public consciousness, groupthink bias kicks in, the market decides on a consensus winner.
Wow.
And when that happens, the line for total market value rockets vertically. The category becomes a multi-billion-dollar space. But simultaneously, the line representing the number of vendors plummets towards 0.
It's a bloodbath of consolidation.
A total bloodbath, because the emerging category king suddenly vacuums up 70 to 80% of all the profits and market share.
Just sucks the air right out of the room.
Yeah. The second place company might grab 10 or 15%, and everyone else is starved of capital and goes bankrupt or gets acquired for pennies.
I love the analogy of this being like running a marathon in the dark.
It's so true.
If you are an entrepreneur building a new category, for those first 4 or 5 years, you are running, sweating, bleeding capital, and you can't even see the finish line. You are spending years conditioning the market's muscles.
Yes.
Think about Airbnb. In 2008, the concept of going to a foreign city and paying to sleep in a stranger's spare bedroom sounded like the plot of a horror movie.
It sounded insane.
It went against every instinct of stranger danger we were ever taught. So Airbnb had to spend years and millions of dollars designing a category based on trust and reviews and community before the mainstream brain finally recategorized sleeping in a stranger's bed from dangerous to economical and authentic.
Right.
You are literally waiting for human psychology to catch up to your vision.
Which requires an immense amount of strategic patience and willful design.
Yeah.
You aren't just shipping code, you're evangelizing a completely new way of living.
Yeah.
Let's make this incredibly concrete by returning to our opening hook.
Okay.
Let's look at what happens when a massive incumbent company ignores all of this psychology and tries to sell better, versus what happens when a master of category design perfectly executes on selling different.
The classic tale of two tablets.
Exactly.
So let's go back to 2002. Bill Gates and the Microsoft tablet PC.
When Gates unveiled that tablet, he made a fatal strategic error. He viewed the problem entirely through the lens of Microsoft's existing cash cow, which was the personal computer and the Windows operating system.
Right.
He didn't want to define a new category. He just wanted to expand the domain of his current kingdom.
So they took this bloated, incredibly complex desktop operating system, Windows XP, and they forcefully shoehorned it onto a 4-pound slate.
It was so heavy.
And you had to use a stylus to navigate these tiny drop-down menus that were designed for a precise mouse click.
Sounds awful.
You had a start button. It was literally a laptop with the keyboard ripped off.
And because it was positioned as a better PC, the market judged it by PC standards.
And by PC standards, it was terrible.
Yeah, it lacked a physical keyboard for typing long documents, it was heavy, and the battery life was abysmal.
Consumers were completely confused about what problem this heavy, awkward device was supposed to solve. Consequently, it failed to spark any shift in human behavior.
But then, fast forward 8 years to January 2010,
Yeah.
Steve Jobs steps onto the stage at the Moscone Center to introduce the iPad. And if you go back and watch the tape of that keynote, the language he uses is surgical.
Oh, it's brilliant.
He does not walk out and say, "We have engineered a tablet PC with a faster processor than Microsoft."
Right, he didn't mention Microsoft at all.
Not once. He sat down in a leather chair. He put up this massive slide showing an iPhone on the left side of the screen and a MacBook on the right side. And he explicitly asked the audience, is there room for a third category of device in the middle?
He literally named what he was doing out loud, a third category.
Yes. He defined the boundaries by defining what the device was not. He said it wasn't a phone and it wasn't a laptop. He argued that for a third category to exist, it had to be fundamentally better at a specific set of tasks than either of the other two devices.
Right.
It had to be better for browsing the web, looking at photos, watching video, and reading.
Wow.
He designed a category around a highly intimate, lean-back consumption experience. He gave the space boundaries. He articulated the problem trying to read a website on a tiny phone or watch a movie on a hot, heavy laptop. And he inserted the iPad as the undisputed king of that newly defined space on day one.
Okay, but I know what you, the listener, might be thinking right now.
What's that?
It is incredibly easy to point to Steve Jobs as the ultimate example. I mean, he was a legendary visionary, operating with the backing of what is now a multi-trillion-dollar monopoly.
Sure.
Of course, Apple can dictate a new category to the market. But what if you don't have a billion-dollar R&D budget? What if you were a scrappy founder or a small business owner? Can a normal person actually execute this playbook?
It is the most important question to ask, and the answer is absolutely yes. Category design is not exclusive to tech titans. To prove it, let's look at the story of Manoj Bhargava.
Oh, the founder of 5-Hour Energy.
Oh,
This is one of my favorite business stories of all time.
It's so good. So Bhargava was not a Silicon Valley insider. He was an entrepreneur with a background in plastics and chemicals.
Not exactly a tech bro.
No, not at all. So in the early 2000s, he was wandering around a natural products trade show. He came across a booth selling a 16-ounce energy drink.
Okay.
He tasted it, and he had a sudden epiphany. The drink certainly gave him a jolt of energy, but it tasted absolutely terrible.
I can imagine.
More importantly, he realized a fundamental disconnect. When people are tired, they aren't necessarily thirsty.
Right. If you are falling asleep at your desk at 3:00 p.m., you want caffeine. You don't want to chug a massive carbonated, sugar-filled soda that's going to make you feel bloated.
Precisely. Now, if Bhargava had followed the standard better mousetrap strategy, he would have gone to a lab and tried to formulate a 16-ounce drink that tasted slightly better than Red Bull or Monster.
Yeah.
He would have tried to design a slightly cooler can. And then he would have gone to war in the convenience store beverage cooler, fighting multinational conglomerates for a few inches of shelf space.
And he would have been instantly crushed.
Totally crushed. But instead, he played a completely different game. He stripped the product down to its core utility. He got rid of the liquid volume, got rid of the carbonation, and created the 2-ounce energy shot.
Genius.
But the real genius wasn't just the product design. It was the category design and the physical placement.
Right, because he refused to put his product in the beverage cooler. He knew that if 5-Hour Energy sat right next to Red Bull, the consumer's brain would anchor it as an overpriced, tiny, bad-tasting soda.
Exactly.
Instead, he designed a custom cardboard display rack and convinced retailers to place it directly on the cash register counter, right next to the chewing gum and the chapstick.
He physically invented a new space. By putting it at the cash register, he completely bypassed the beverage wars.
Right.
He categorized the product as a medicinal impulse buy.
Yeah.
It was a rapid, friction-free solution to a biological problem, fatigue, presented at the exact moment the consumer was opening their wallet.
And the results speak for themselves. I mean, he captured roughly 90% of a billion-dollar market. He became a billionaire not by fighting the kings, but by finding a completely empty patch of land and crowning himself king of a new country.
Which perfectly illustrates that to play bigger, you have to stop benchmarking your features against the current leader.
Right.
You have to find the unaddressed anxiety or friction, to find a new space to solve it, and own that space completely.
Right.
But, how do you actually guarantee that you are building something different and not just sliding back into the trap of better?
The text provides a rigid framework for this called the Maleic triangle.
I love the visual the authors use for this, the three-legged bar stool. It makes the concept incredibly visceral. Let's break down how this triangle actually functions. Okay, so to engineer a category king, a company must design three distinct elements simultaneously. If you neglect any one of them, the whole structure collapses.
Okay, what's leg number one?
Leg number one is product design. This is the literal engineering of the solution. It is the code of the software, the formulation of the beverage, the physical hardware. It is the thing that actually solves the user's problem.
Got it. And leg number two?
Leg number two is company design. This is the internal architecture of the business. It encompasses the pricing model, the distribution channels, the internal corporate culture, and the go-to-market strategy. It has to perfectly align with the product.
Makes sense. And leg three?
Leg number three is category design. This is the external psychological work of creating the market itself. It is the messaging, the evangelism, and the conditioning of the public to abandon their old habits and embrace this newly defined space.
Let's focus on what happens when a company gets one of these legs wrong, because it happens all the time.
Oh, constantly.
Imagine you have a team of brilliant engineers, and they absolutely nail leg number one. They build an incredible revolutionary piece of technology,
Okay.
but they completely ignore company design. A classic historical example is Webvan from the late 90s dot-com boom.
Oh, Webbear.
Yeah, they had a great product idea delivering groceries to your door ordered via the internet. People wanted it, but their company design, specifically their business model, was a disaster.
What'd they do?
They burned through $1 billion building these massive automated warehouses before they had the customer density to actually support it. The business model couldn't support the product, the stool fell over, and they went bankrupt.
It is a critical point. You can have the most elegant product in the world, but if your culture or your pricing model clashes with the category, you will fail.
Right.
The magic happens when all three legs are engineered to reinforce each other, creating a massive flywheel effect.
A fly, oh yeah.
The category design clearly articulates a problem to the public. That draws in eager customers. The product design solves their problem flawlessly, which generates user data. The company design leverages that data to monetize efficiently and reinvest in the culture.
And round it goes.
As the flywheel spins, the product gets sharper, the company gets richer, and the category becomes deeply entrenched in the societal subconscious. By the time a competitor realizes what is happening, the flywheel is spinning so fast that the king is untouchable.
To truly grasp the gravity of this magic triangle, I want us to look at two legendary technology companies.
Okay.
Because we think we understand why they won, but when you view them through the lens of category design, the narrative completely flips. Let's start with the ultimate titan, Google.
Google. The consensus narrative is that Google won the search engine wars simply because Larry Page and Sergey Brin coded a better algorithm.
Right, that's what everyone thinks.
And to be fair, their product design, the PageRank algorithm, was truly revolutionary. Instead of just scanning web pages for keyword density like AltaVista or Ask Jeeves did.
Oh, wow, Ask Jeeves.
I know, right? But Google analyzed the hyperlink structure of the web itself. They treated a link from one site to another as a vote of confidence, which yielded vastly superior, highly relevant search results.
So they absolutely nailed leg one. They have phenomenal product. But the text argues that if they had stopped there, they would have just been a highly efficient free tool that eventually ran out of server money.
Exactly. The product was great, but their true genius, the thing that cemented them as an enduring category king, was their company and category design. Specifically, the creation and scaling of AdWords.
Let's dive deep into the mechanics of AdWords because it is arguably the most lucrative category invention in modern history. Before Google, what did internet advertising even look like?
It was primitive. Portals like Yahoo essentially took the analog magazine model and just slapped it onto a computer screen. They sold banner ads based on CPM, or cost per mil, meaning you paid a flat rate for 1,000 eyeballs to see your ad. It's basically a digital billboard.
Like driving down the highway.
Yeah. You put up an ad for car insurance on the Yahoo homepage, and you just prayed that a fraction of the millions of people who saw it actually needed car insurance that day. It was high friction, highly inefficient, and incredibly expensive for advertisers.
So how did Google redefine that category?
They adapted and perfected an auction-based model, heavily influenced by an earlier company called Overture, but they integrated it directly into the search experience. Google created a new category of intent-based advertising.
Intent-based.
Yes, they realized that when a human being types the words "buy running shoes size 10" into a search bar, they're signaling their exact immediate intent.
They're raising their hands saying, I want to buy this right now.
Precisely. Google didn't sell space. They monetized human curiosity at the exact millisecond of demand. Advertisers could bid on specific keywords and only pay when a user actually clicked on the ad.
They completely redesigned how businesses connect with customers. They categorized search as a direct response marketplace rather than a media portal.
And the data reflects the sheer dominance of that category creation. Today, Google holds roughly 90% of the global search market share.
90%.
Microsoft has spent billions of dollars over decades trying to build a better search engine with Bing, and they are essentially fighting for scraps.
Microsoft tried to play the better game. Google invented a different game that generated hundreds of billions of dollars.
Let's look at one more example from the enterprise software world, which illustrates how a properly designed category actually does the selling for you. Let's look at VMware.
The story of Diane Green and Mendel Rosenblum. To understand this, we have to set the scene in a corporate server room in the late 1990s.
Back then, if a corporation needed to run different applications, the ironclad rule of IT was one application per physical server. If you ran your corporate email software and your accounting software on the same physical machine, and the accounting software crashed, it would take down the email system with it.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
That was unacceptable.
Yeah.
So companies had to buy separate, expensive, physical metal servers for every single task.
It was a massive waste of resources. A server dedicated solely to running a minor database might only use 5% of its total computing power. You had these massive rooms filled with silicon, sucking up enormous amounts of electricity and air conditioning, operating at a fraction of their capacity.
Rare waste.
It was an unspoken, anxiety-inducing problem for every chief information officer in the world.
Enter Mendel Rosenblum, a computer science professor at Stanford. He and his team figured out a way to write a piece of software called a hypervisor.
A hypervisor.
This software essentially built an ironclad digital wall inside a single physical server, allowing it to run multiple operating systems independently and simultaneously. If one crashed, the others kept running. They called it virtual machine software.
Now, Diane Green, the CEO, and her team had nailed the product design. They had this revolutionary software. But instead of hiring a massive enterprise sales force to go knock on doors and beg IT managers to buy it, they engaged in brilliant category design. They put a version of the software online for a 30-day free trial.
And the response was violent. The pent-up demand for a solution to this invisible problem was so overwhelming that the traffic literally crashed VMware servers on a Sunday.
On a Sunday.
They had to scramble, and a student at Cornell University ended up hosting the software on the university's massive servers just to handle the load. Over 75,000 IT professionals downloaded it almost instantly.
The mechanics of that story represent the holy grail of this entire philosophy. VMware didn't have to push their product onto a reluctant market. By clearly defining this massive, painful problem of underutilized corporate computers, the category literally pulled the product out of the company.
When a new category is clearly defined, the market experiences an awakening. When those IT managers suddenly realized they didn't have to live with rooms full of wasted servers, they felt a spike of urgency. A newly defined problem demands a king. The market desperately wants a leader to step up, take control of the chaos, and provide the definitive solution. VMware became that king because they orchestrated the triangle perfectly. They designed the product that solved the technical issue, they built the company to distribute it, and they defined the category that the market suddenly realized it couldn't live without.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, navigating through the history of strategy, the neurobiology of decision-making, and the tactical architecture of empire building.
We really have.
If we synthesize all of this, if we extract the absolute soul of this chapter, what is the central governing truth? For me, it is the realization that the most exciting, world-altering companies absolutely do not sell better. They sell different.
They really do.
We hear the word disruption thrown around boardrooms and business schools as if it is the ultimate goal. But disruption is an illusion. It is merely a byproduct of creation. You don't set out to destroy the old way. You set out to build a new space so compelling that the old way simply crumbles as a consequence of obsolescence.
I agree completely. The true essence of category design is cognitive transformation. Your fundamental job, regardless of what industry you're in, is to change the way people think.
Right.
Whether you are engineering hypervisors for enterprise servers, mixing an energy drink, or building a platform to hail a ride across town, if you can successfully change how people perceive a problem, you inevitably change their behavior.
You change the world.
You drop a new cognitive anchor, you provide the psychological safety of consensus, and you align the magic triangle to support the weight of the new world you've built. When you change behavior at scale, the market has no choice but to crown you.
It is about owning the architecture of the problem inside the mind of the consumer. So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, highly personal thought. We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing multi-billion-dollar tech titans and revolutionary startups. But the laws of category design do not just apply to corporate entities. They apply directly to human capital. They apply to you.
That's a great point.
Take a hard look at your own career, your own trajectory. Are you exhausting yourself trying to be the best employee in a highly crowded, deeply established field? Are you constantly fighting for a marginal promotion, trying to prove you are 5% faster or 10% more efficient than the person sitting at the desk next to you?
Operating like that is the personal equivalent of fighting for an inch of shelf space in the craft beer aisle. You are drowning in the noise.
Exactly. You are playing someone else's game by their rules. So ask yourself, is it time to stop competing on the axis of better?
Yeah.
Can you identify an unarticulated problem within your industry, an area of massive friction that everyone else just accepts as normal? Can you define a unique intersection of your specific skills, step into that void, and become a category of one?
A category of one.
We have mapped out the profound why behind this philosophy. We've decoded the brain science, analyzed the historical shifts, and reviewed the timeline of behavioral change. But how do you actually execute it?
That's the big question.
How do you write the operational playbook, mobilize a team, and launch a coordinated lightning strike on the market to force the world to see things your way? Well, that is a deep dive into the next chapter for another day. Until then, remember that the old maps are completely useless. The only way forward is to draw your own, keep questioning the consensus, and we'll catch you next time. So imagine it's the year 2005, and this massive software company, Macromedia, is just facing this completely terrifying reality.
Oh, yeah. Terrifying is the right word for it.
Right. And I mean, they had a roster of incredibly talented engineers, like the absolute best in the business.
It's really cutting edge stuff.
Yeah, exactly. They were building these amazing digital tools. They were shipping new features constantly, and yet they were just completely stalled out.
Just totally stuck.
Right. They were standing in the middle of a thunderstorm, holding up this giant metal pole, just, waiting and praying to get struck by lightning.
Which is not a great business strategy, by the way.
No, definitely not. And that's actually the deeply uncomfortable truth we're looking at today. Because building the best product in your industry, it is actually a guaranteed way to fail if you are just relying on the market to magically figure out why you matter.
Yeah, that magical thinking kills so many companies.
It really does, because the companies that are truly altering the landscape, I mean, the ones that build empires instead of just features, they do not wait for the weather to change.
Right.
They make the weather.
And that fundamentally flips the script on everything we're taught about building a business, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
Because we are so culturally conditioned to believe in this sort of, this field of dreams meritocracy.
Right. If you build it, they will come.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We think if you just put your head down, write cleaner code, design a sharper logo, maybe offer a slightly cheaper service, that the invisible hand of the market is just going to magically reward you.
Right. Like the market is just this fair judge handing out gold medals for the best features.
But what we are going to explore today completely dismantles that illusion. I mean, it shatters it. You cannot just float in the market anymore. You have to actively architect it.
Which brings us to the core of what we are doing here today. Welcome to this deep dive. Over the course of our conversation today, we are going to unpack the architecture of this thing called category design.
And this is such a crucial concept.
It really is. We are pulling all of this from this incredible chapter in the book, Play Bigger, specifically chapter 4. And it breaks down this discipline in a way that is just going to completely alter how you view business strategy, product development, even your own career trajectory.
Because the stakes are just incredibly high for anyone listening to this.
Exactly. Because if you do not intentionally design your category and, really condition your customers to demand your exact solution, I promise you, your competitors are sitting in a boardroom right now, designing a category that will render you entirely obsolete.
Yeah, they will happily leave you in the dust.
So let's just jump right in. To understand why category design is so critical right now, we actually have to look backward for a minute, right?
Yeah, we have to understand that business disciplines are not just these static things that have always existed.
Yeah.
They evolve.
Right. They evolve in direct response to the specific friction of an era.
Exactly. The text takes us on this fascinating historical progression, really showing how every major technological shift in human history essentially forced the invention of a brand new business discipline to, well, to tame it.
So let's trace that timeline for everyone because I think it frames this whole concept perfectly.
Let's do it.
The text starts by taking us back to the 1920s, so the dawn of the mechanization era.
Right, when machines were first entering the home.
Exactly. Suddenly you had all these really complex machines entering the domestic sphere, like early automobiles, mechanized washing machines, the very first electric toasters.
But if you look at photos of those early
Oh
machines,
man, they are terrifying.
they really are.
Yeah.
They were basically exposed mechanical monstrosities.
Yeah, because they were built by engineers purely for other engineers.
Right, a 1920s washing machine literally looked like it was designed to tear your arm off.
Just exposed belts everywhere.
Exposed belts, aggressive gears, raw metal edges, just a nightmare.
So the friction of that era, it wasn't really about whether the machine functioned right.
No, it was about human physical safety and approachability. The average consumer looked at these things and just felt completely intimidated.
Right, they were scared of their own laundry.
Exactly. So a new discipline had to be born to solve that specific friction, and that was industrial design.
Right, because suddenly it wasn't enough to just build a motor that spun. You had to actually hire people whose entire job was to turn those scary mechanical beasts into sleek, modern, approachable forms.
They were the ones who put those smooth, enameled casings over the washing machine belts.
And they gave cars those sweeping aerodynamic curves.
Yeah, they designed the physical interface so humans actually felt safe interacting with mechanization.
And that discipline, industrial design, that defined corporate dominance for decades.
It did. But then, of course, the friction shifted again.
Right, so let's fast forward to the 1980s, the dawn of the personal computer era.
A huge shift. Computing power was finally moving out of those massive, sterile, air-conditioned laboratories.
And onto the messy desks of everyday office workers and into living rooms.
But the friction here wasn't physical safety anymore.
No, I mean, a computer isn't going to pull your arm into a gear.
Right. But if you've ever tried to use an early 1980s PC, with a command line interface.
Oh, having to type raw code into a blinking green cursor just to save a basic text file.
Exactly. It was a completely different kind of it was cognitive friction.
Yeah, how do ordinary human beings actually interact with abstract digital information on a screen without needing a degree in computer science?
And that exact cognitive gap birthed product design as we know it today.
Firms like IDEO really pioneered this space, right?
Yeah, they had to figure out the physical and cognitive bridge between humans and the digital realm.
Yeah.
It was no longer just about making the machine look nice on a counter.
It was about usability.
Usability, ergonomics, interaction. I mean, they brought us the first commercial computer mouse.
Which is crazy to think about that someone had to invent that concept.
Right. And the concept of a graphical user interface with things like folders and a desktop.
Using physical world metaphors to make the digital world understandable.
Exactly. Product design solved the friction of digital interaction.
Which carries us to the early 2000s, the massive internet boom.
Right. Suddenly everyone is connected and the friction changes yet again.
Because it's no longer about how to use a single machine sitting on your desk.
No, it's about clicking from site to site, navigating this endless web of information. The problem was that users could just leave your digital storefront with a single click.
They get bored, they leave. So the friction became about attention and retention.
Which required the birth of experience design. You had to design the entire digital journey to make it sticky, to make it intuitive.
To make the user actually feel a sense of trust or even delight while they're navigating a checkout process.
Think about Amazon inventing the one-click checkout.
Oh, right.
That wasn't just a coding feat. That was a massive experience design triumph to remove every possible barrier between a user's desire and their actual purchase.
And that progression, from industrial design to product design to experience design, that brings us directly to the absolute chaos of today.
The mobile, social, cloud era.
Where the barriers to entry for starting a business are practically zero.
Yeah, a couple of teenagers in a garage can spin up a global app on Amazon Web Services over the weekend.
You can drop ship products from across the world with just a Shopify account. The sheer volume of noise, the infinite barrage of options is just deafening.
And that right there is the unique friction of our current era. Infinite choice.
Infinite choice.
Because if you build a great feature today, 10 competitors will reverse engineer it and launch a clone by next Tuesday.
You just cannot win on product alone anymore.
Exactly. And the text argues that to tame this era of infinite choice, we require this newest discipline, which is category design.
It's really the only way to cut through a market where traditional advantages like distribution or feature sets have just been completely commoditized.
Really?
So to really ground what category design looks like in practice, the text gives us this incredible behind-the-scenes look at how this evolution from experience design to category design actually started to take shape.
And this involves that company you mentioned at the very beginning, Macromedia.
Right. So the authors of our source material were actually consulting for Macromedia in the early 2000s. And the CEO at the time, a guy named Rob Burgess, sat down with them and just vented his absolute frustration.
I love this
He
story.
told them, "I have a bag of doorknobs."
Oh, I love that phrase so much. It just perfectly encapsulates the existential dread of so many product teams and founders today.
It's such a visceral image, right? Just imagine dumping a heavy canvas sack of loose doorknobs onto a glass conference table.
It makes no sense.
Because Macromedia had all these incredible individual software products. They had Flash, they had Dreamweaver, Cold Fusion.
And they were adding more and more features, just polishing these individual doorknobs, essentially.
But the revenue wasn't moving.
No, because
Okay.
the market looked at them and just saw a disjointed hardware store.
Right. Because nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I really want to buy a doorknob today.
Exactly. They buy a doorknob because they are building a house. They want the room behind the door.
But Macromedia was so obsessed with the technical supremacy of their individual tools that they completely forgot to tell the market what the tools were actually for.
They were trapped. They were trapped in the old discipline of product design, trying to win a war of features.
So these consultants essentially forced Macromedia to zoom out.
They did. They realized Macromedia needed to own a specific overarching concept on the web.
They needed to own the very idea of a fluid, engaging web experience.
So they coined a brand new term for it: rich internet applications.
And they told Macromedia to stop selling individual doorknobs and start selling this entirely new category.
Right. They packaged all those disparate tools into one unified, indispensable offering, and they called it Macromedia Studio MX.
And the shift in perception from the market was just seismic.
Oh, completely. By shifting the focus from the individual products to the entire category of rich internet applications, they changed how the market valued them entirely.
They weren't just a vendor selling a coding tool anymore.
No, they became the architects of the modern web.
Which is wild. And when Adobe eventually bought Macromedia for, what, $3.4 billion?
Yep, $3.4 billion.
A massive part of that premium valuation was purely based on this category dominance. Adobe didn't just want the code. They wanted to own the category that Macromedia had successfully designed and conditioned the market to demand.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it.
It makes me think of an analogy, like having a bag of doorknobs is kind of like a car salesman trying to sell you a steering wheel, a spark plug, and a tire completely separately.
Right.
If you just hand me a beautifully leather-wrapped steering wheel, I'm just confused. I might even think, well, this is a really nice steering wheel, but I'm not going to buy it because I have zero context for it.
You don't have a car to put it in.
Exactly. But if you sell me the dream of a cross-country road trip with my family, if you sell me the destination, the whole experience.
I suddenly need everything you have.
Exactly. I need the wheel, the tires, the engine, the whole thing.
And that is the exact psychological shift at play here. You are moving the customer's focus away from the microscopic features of your product, and you're moving it toward a massive macro-level problem or desire that they didn't even realize they had until you pointed it out.
But let me pause and play devil's advocate here for a second. Because when I first read this section, my immediate cynical reaction was, wait, isn't category design just a fancy 21st century Silicon Valley term for marketing or branding, right? Like, we talk about shifting perceptions, selling a dream, giving things a new label. Isn't this just putting lipstick on a pig and calling it a new species?
It is honestly the most common pitfall to view it that way. And understanding the difference is really the threshold concept for this entire philosophy. So let's break down the structural difference here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Marketing in its traditional sense, is about selling what you already have to a market that already exists.
Okay.
It operates within a defined sandbox.
Yeah.
You are trying to capture market share from competitors by saying, my doorknob is cheaper, or my doorknob is shinier.
Or my doorknob is endorsed by a celebrity.
Exactly.
Right, so it's basically a battle of adjectives, like, buy our CRM, it's 20% faster than the other guys.
Yes, you are implicitly accepting the rules of the game that someone else wrote. And branding is similar, right? Branding is about creating an emotional resonance with your specific company within that existing market.
Right.
But category design, it is an architectural discipline. It's a fundamentally altering how people think, so they realize they actually need what you're building because you have revealed a gap in their world that only your new category can fill.
So you are not fighting for a slice of the pie.
No, you are baking an entirely new type of pastry and convincing everyone that pie is a thing of the past.
Oh, I love that. That means it goes way beyond just the marketing department then.
Way beyond.
Because if you are just putting a new slogan on a billboard, but your engineering team is still building the same old product, you're just lying to the market.
Exactly. And the market will figure that out very quickly.
Right. Category design has to dictate product development. It has to dictate company culture, the sales compensation structure, the overarching business strategy.
You aren't just putting a tattoo on a product. You are genetically engineering the product, the company, and the market to all fit together perfectly.
Which is why the text introduces a very specific operational framework for this.
Right, because you can't just wake up, write a Medium post declaring a new category, and expect the world to just blindly follow you.
That would be nice, but no. The source material defines category design as the mindful creation of a new market, and it breaks it down into a highly integrated system.
Let's dig into that system, because I think people want to know, how does a company actually architect this?
Right. If it's not just a clever ad campaign, what are the actual structural pillars that have to be put in place?
Well, the book outlines 6 core pillars of category design. And the key here is that they have to operate simultaneously.
Okay, what's the first one?
The very first pillar, and arguably the one where most companies fail right out of the gate, is that this must be a strategy driven by the CEO, or the supreme leader of the organization.
Let's hold on that for a second. Because if a CEO is busy running the operations, managing cash flow, dealing with the board of directors, putting out daily fires.
Which they always are.
Right. Why can't they just hire a brilliant $1 million chief marketing officer? Just say, hey, you're the marketing genius. Go design our category while I keep the trains running on time.
It happens all the time. And it is almost always a complete disaster.
Really?
Let's invent a hypothetical scenario to see why this fails structurally.
Okay.
Imagine a mid-sized tech company.
Yeah.
The CEO delegates category design to the CMO.
Makes sense on paper.
Right. The CMO goes away, does a bunch of deep thinking, and comes up with a brilliant new category that completely redefines the industry. They launch a massive PR campaign, they change the website, they declare a new era.
Sounds great so far. I'm ready to buy.
Until Monday morning.
What happens Monday morning?
A sales rep gets on a call with a major client. The client saw the new marketing and asks, I love this new category vision. How does your pricing model actually support this?
Uh-oh.
But the VP of sales, who does not report to the CMO, hasn't changed the compensation structure.
Right.
The sales rep is still strictly incentivized to sell the old legacy product by the seat.
Because that's how they hit their quota.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the rep gets confused, pitches the old product anyway, and the client feels completely disconnected and walks away.
Or think about the engineering team. The CMO promises this revolutionary new category to the press, but the head of product is still working off a roadmap from 18 months ago.
Yes. They are just building incremental features for the old category because nobody told them to stop.
Wow, yeah. A CMO, no matter how visionary they are, they just don't have the authority to walk into the engineering department and tell them to scrap their entire roadmap.
And they certainly don't have the authority to fire a VP of sales who refuses to adopt the new pricing model.
Right.
Only the CEO, the supreme leader, has the absolute authority to force every single department into that kind of structural alignment. If the CEO isn't the chief evangelist, the immense gravity of day-to-day operations will just pull every department right back to their comfortable legacy habits.
That is such a crucial point. It perfectly sets up the rest of the pillars because they all rely on that top-down mandate.
They absolutely do.
So the second pillar involves product and ecosystem blueprinting.
Right, meaning you aren't just designing your product in a vacuum, you were actively designing the environment it will live in.
You are figuring out who your partners are, what integrations are necessary, how developers will actually build on top of your platform.
You are building the infrastructure of the new category.
Exactly. Then the third pillar focuses inward. It shapes the company culture.
Because the category has to become the company's point of view on the world.
Right. It's not just some bland mission statement on a poster in the break room. It is a shared religious belief among the employees about how the world ought to be.
Every single employee needs to be able to articulate why the old way is broken and why the new category is the inevitable future.
Which moves us outward with the fourth pillar, relying on a provocative story that evokes choice.
This one is so critical.
It is. You aren't just offering a shiny new toy. You are forcing the customer to make a binary decision.
You are telling a story that makes them realize that continuing in the old way is an active choice to suffer, and stepping into your new category is the only logical path forward.
Which leads directly into the fifth pillar. The PR and marketing efforts focus entirely on conditioning the market rather than just pushing a product's specific features.
And we are going to dive incredibly deep into this in a moment, but the core idea is that your marketing dollars are spent explaining the philosophy of the category. You are educating the market on why the shift is happening, rather than just shouting about your tech specs.
And finally, pillar 6. It works like a symphony.
Which brings us right back to the CEO mandate.
Right. Every single department, sales, engineering, marketing, HR, customer success, they must play the exact same score.
Because if the marketing team is playing Mozart, but the product team is playing Metallica,
the market just hears noise and walks away.
Exactly. The category design must be the sheet music for the entire organization.
Now, to show that these pillars aren't just some modern Silicon Valley invention, the text provides some absolutely wild, large-scale historical precedents for how category design actually works in the real world.
Oh, this part is fascinating. It argues that this is fundamentally how major shifts in human history have always happened.
The examples are staggering because they really pull back the curtain on how human behavior is engineered on a massive scale.
Yeah.
For instance, the text points to the Apostle Paul between 37 and 67 AD.
Right. And looking at this purely through the lens of structural communication.
Exactly, strictly structurally. Paul didn't just market a slightly better version of existing Roman or Jewish traditions.
No, he didn't say, hey, here is an incremental improvement to your current belief system.
Right. He used a provocative story to condition the known civilized world for a completely new category of religion, one based on grace and universal inclusion.
He evangelized a totally new category and built an ecosystem. Churches, letters, a network of followers to support it.
The text also points to 1776. The American rebels didn't just petition the King of England for like a 10% reduction in tea taxes.
No, because that would be operating in the existing category of a monarchy.
Right, playing by the old rules. Instead, they designed a completely new category of a nation based on democratic representation and inherent equality.
They wrote a literal blueprint, the Declaration of Independence.
Which was a highly provocative story that forced a choice. They conditioned the market for a new form of governance.
Now, the text also uses a fascinating, purely historical case study here. And we should be super clear, setting aside the actual politics of it entirely and just looking at it strictly from a structural marketing perspective.
Right, purely as a framework of persuasion.
It points out how Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin designed a new category of a nation based on communism.
And again, the text explicitly notes this category as ultimately flawed and destructive. And we're obviously not here to debate the politics.
Right, not at all. But structurally, it is a textbook example of articulating a massive societal problem, forcing a choice, and attempting to blueprint an entirely new ecosystem that rejected the existing capitalist category entirely.
It really highlights that the mechanics of category design are amoral.
They are. The ability to articulate a deep-seated problem and present a radical new two-state is just incredibly powerful. It's how public perception is shifted, for better or worse.
Just to bring it back to a lighter example, they also look at the Beatles in 1964.
Oh, perfect example.
The Beatles didn't just play better jazz or better rockabilly. They didn't compete on the existing musical metrics of the time.
No, they conditioned the global market for an entirely new category of intelligent, studio-driven pop rock.
They completely changed the weather in the music industry. They forced everyone else to either adapt to their new category or just become entirely irrelevant.
And what all these historical figures have in common, from Paul to the founders to the Beatles, they didn't wait for the world to naturally evolve toward their ideas.
They aggressively and systematically engineered the transition.
And they did it using a very specific communication sequence.
Which brings us to perhaps the most actionable, just mind-bending concept in this entire deep dive.
I love this part.
If you understand this next concept, it will completely change how you pitch your business, how you write your resume, how you communicate your value entirely.
It's game-changing.
So let's talk about the Frodo, the from/to journey, and the absolute necessity of marketing the problem.
This right here is where most brilliant engineers and founders completely sabotage themselves.
Yep.
The profound point the text makes is that you cannot just drop a brilliant, elegant new solution onto the market and expect people to magically get it.
You can't just say, here's the answer.
No, because you have to recognize that your customers are currently living in a different reality. You have to take them on a psychological journey.
You have to move them from their old, flawed frame of reference to your new frame of reference.
And the sequencing of this is so counterintuitive.
It really is, because if you spend 3 years building a revolutionary product, your every instinct is to scream about the solution.
Right, you want to show off the features, the speed, the sleek interface.
But category design dictates a harsh rule here. You must define and market the problem before you can even introduce the solution.
Because if the customer doesn't recognize they have a problem, they're going to look at your beautiful solution and say, well, that's nice, but I don't need it.
Exactly. And the source material provides this legendary masterclass on this exact dynamic. They look at Mark Benioff and the launch of Salesforce back in 1999.
And to truly appreciate this, we have to deeply understand what the from state looked like in 1999.
Oh, it was bleak.
We have to understand the daily misery of corporate IT departments.
Let's paint that picture for everyone. In 1999, the absolute king of customer relationship management CRM software was a company called Siebel Systems.
Right?
If you were a big corporation and you wanted to track your sales leads, you bought Siebel. But this wasn't like signing up for an app today.
Not at all. Buying enterprise software in 1999 was an absolute nightmare.
Let's use an analogy to really drive this home. Imagine buying a car, okay? But the dealership tells you that you also have to build a multi-million-dollar climate-controlled garage on your own property just to house the car.
Okay, sounds awful already.
Then you have to hire a team of 3 specialized mechanics to live in your house full-time just to keep the car running.
Right.
And every time the car manufacturer wants to update the radio, the mechanic have to take the entire car apart over a 3-day weekend. And half the time, the car won't even start on Monday morning.
That is exactly what on-premise software was.
It's insane. You didn't just buy the software. You had to buy a literal room full of massive, expensive servers to host it.
You had to hire a dedicated IT team to maintain it.
The implementations took millions of dollars, sometimes 18 months before a single sales rep could even log in.
And when it was time for a software upgrade, it meant weekend-long system outages, data corruption panics, just massive consulting fees.
But here's the critical part. In 1999, everyone just accepted this as the normal cost of doing business.
It was the weather.
Everyone hated it, everyone complained about it, but no one thought it could be any different. It was just the accepted friction of the era.
Enter Mark Benioff.
Enter Mark Benioff. His 2 state was revolutionary. A cloud-based subscription CRM.
Right, no servers to buy.
No software to install. You just open a web browser, log in, and pay a monthly fee.
The software updates itself invisibly over the internet.
It seems obvious to us now, right? But in 1999, it was alien technology.
So how did Benioff launch it? Did he take out full-page ads talking about his server architecture?
Did he talk about how his user interface was cleaner than Siebel's?
Did he market his features?
Absolutely not. He marketed the problem.
Yes.
He aggressively, relentlessly attacked the pain of the from state. He didn't even call it a cloud CRM at first.
No, he pitched a story to a Wall Street Journal reporter about the end of software.
Think about how provocative that is. He didn't say better software. He said the entire concept of software, as you know it, is dead.
He was forcing a choice. He was taking the latent, accepted pain of the IT departments and dragging it into the glaring light.
He went all out, too. He hosted launch parties with that exact same theme, the end of software.
He literally hired actors to hold up signs protesting traditional software outside of a massive Siebel Systems conference.
That is so bold. And he created a logo that became iconic. It looked like the Ghostbusters logo, a red circle with a slash through it, but with the word software inside.
He spent all of his initial time and resources conditioning the market to realize that managing traditional software was a massive, expensive, soul-crushing headache that they no longer had to put up with.
He essentially made the market feel the pain they had previously just numbed themselves to. He agitated the wound.
But there is a massive risk here that we really have to address.
Yes. Let's talk about the risk, because this is where a lot of founders get cold feet.
Very cold feet.
If you are a startup with limited venture capital, you have a very short runway.
You're burning gas.
Right. Spending your precious, scarce marketing dollars talking about a problem, talking about the end of software, instead of talking about how great your new product actually is, it goes against every traditional business instinct.
It feels crazy.
How do you know if your firm is actually clearly understood by the market? What if you spend all this money talking about a problem and people just shrug and say, yeah, it's annoying, but it's not a big deal?
That is the tightrope walk of category design.
Yeah.
And to understand why it works, you have to look at the deep psychology of human communication.
Okay, break that down.
The text delves into this by drawing a parallel to how masterful political communicators operate. And again, setting aside the actual politics and just looking at the mechanics of persuasion.
Purely structural.
The text references Bill Clinton's famous campaign phrase, "I feel your pain," and Ronald Reagan's pivotal debate question, "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?"
Those are powerful examples because they don't actually promise a specific policy. They force the listener to deeply evaluate their current from state.
Exactly. The psychological mechanism at play here is a profound cognitive shortcut. When someone is able to articulate your problem perfectly,
When they can describe your daily frustrations, your hidden fears, your exact pain points better than you can articulate them yourself.
human psychology dictates that you automatically, almost subconsciously, assume they possess the solution.
That is wild. It's like a neurological glitch we have.
It is a heuristic. We conserve brain energy. Think about it like going to a doctor.
Okay.
If you go to a specialist, and before you even finish explaining what's wrong, the doctor says, let me guess, you have a sharp pain behind your left eye that gets worse at 3 p.m., your vision blurs, and you feel a tingling in your jaw.
Wow, yeah.
If they describe your obscure symptoms with absolute terrifying precision, you don't cross-examine their medical degree, right?
No, I'm not asking to see the chemical breakdown of the prescription. I'm just assuming that they hold the cure, and I just say, yes, give me the pills.
Exactly. You implicitly trust them because they understood the problem so perfectly.
Oh, wow. That maps perfectly back to Salesforce.
It does.
Benioff went to corporate IT directors who were losing their weekends to server crashes, who were blowing their budgets on consultants. He didn't say, look at my web-based database.
He said, I know you are sick of buying servers.
I know you hate paying for upgrades that break your system. I know you are tired of being treated like a hostage by your software vendor.
He articulated their pain so perfectly that when he finally said, just log into this website instead, Salesforce became the inevitable automatic savior.
He didn't have to sell the features. He sold the relief from the exact problem he just made them acutely aware of.
And that is the true power of marketing the problem. If you can define the problem better than your customer can, they will blindly trust your solution.
So let's translate this into a highly actionable takeaway for everyone listening right now. Whether you are launching a startup, revamping a department, or even just trying to get a promotion at work.
It applies everywhere.
You need to explicitly map out the exact from state your target audience is stuck in right now. What are their silent headaches? What are the absurd inefficiencies they have just accepted as normal?
And then map out the precise to state you are guiding them toward.
Because if you cannot articulate their current pain better than they can, they are never going to follow you into the new category. You have to market the problem.
But doing that requires a very specific and often very uncomfortable disposition from the leadership.
It really does. You have to be willing to stand on a stage and tell the market that the way they are currently doing things, the way they might have been doing things for decades, is fundamentally wrong.
Which brings us to the final major concept. The courage to be non-consensus.
The text makes it incredibly clear that category design is not for the faint of heart.
No, it is not for people who need to be liked by everyone immediately.
Right. By definition, if you are creating a new category, you are stepping into unknown territory where the market does not yet agree with you.
It requires an absolute unwavering belief in a reality that others literally cannot yet see.
It actively goes against our biological tribal instincts. As humans, we want to fit in. We want validation from our peers. We want the experts to pat us on the head and say, good job.
But category design requires you to actively seek out invalidation at the start.
There is a fantastic quote in the text from Brian Roberts. He's a venture capitalist at Venrock, and he lays it out perfectly. He says, part of being a category king is having the courage to be non-consensus. If you're using a model you've seen elsewhere, you are de facto following.
I think about Elon Musk as the prime modern example of this.
Oh, totally. With both Tesla and SpaceX, he flew directly in the face of conventional wisdom.
He didn't just tweak existing models. When Musk started Tesla, the established automotive category dictated that electric cars were basically glorified golf carts.
They were slow, they were ugly, and they had a range of like 40 miles.
And when he started SpaceX, the aerospace category dictated that only massive, bureaucratic nation-states could launch rockets. And you threw the rocket away after one use.
Musk was told by literal astronauts, his childhood heroes, by the way, that private reusable spaceflight was impossible and dangerous.
He had to absorb a staggering amount of institutional ridicule.
He was a punchline on financial news networks for years.
But he held his ground. Because he wasn't trying to build a better golf cart, and he wasn't trying to build a cheaper disposable rocket.
He was designing entirely new categories. He was marketing a new future.
But this brings up a really crucial tension. We celebrate the Elon Musks of the world after they succeed.
Right. In hindsight, they're geniuses.
But in the moment, when you are in the trenches, it's incredibly confusing.
This is exactly where I get tripped up, because there is a very fine, very blurry line between being a visionary who is bravely non-consensus and just being stubbornly, objectively wrong.
It's true.
I mean, every failing entrepreneur sitting in a coffee shop with a terrible idea thinks they are just a misunderstood visionary. Every bad manager who refuses to listen to feedback thinks they're just being non-consensus.
Delusion is very common.
So how does a leader actually know the difference? How do you know if you are making the weather or just screaming at a cloud?
That is the ultimate existential question for any creator. And the text addresses this by exploring the profound philosophical difference between being different versus being better.
Okay, different versus better.
This is the acid test.
Yeah.
Let's say you pitch your new business idea to a room full of industry experts and potential customers. If everyone in that room immediately nods, smiles, agrees with you, and understands exactly what you are doing.
That sounds great.
It does, but you are almost certainly aiming too low. You're probably just making a better version of something that already exists.
Oh, right. It's the classic Henry Ford quote scenario. You're just pitching a faster horse.
Exactly. People understand a faster horse immediately.
And if you are just making a faster horse, you are stepping into an existing crowded category.
Which means you are willingly signing up for a brutal, margin-crushing, bloody battle for market share against established players who have more money and more distribution than you do.
You are fighting over scraps in someone else's kingdom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, if your idea is truly different, if it's a genuine new category, you will face initial disbelief.
People will tilt their heads like a confused dog.
They will push back. They will tell you it won't work, that the market doesn't want it, that the technology isn't there.
So you're saying that initial rejection, that friction, is actually a positive signal. It's proof you are off the beaten path.
It is a necessary precondition, yes, but it's not the only test. Because a terrible idea also gets rejected.
Good point.
The true test of whether you are a visionary category designer or just stubbornly wrong is what happens after you clearly articulate the problem. What happens after you take them on that Frodo journey?
Walk me through that. What does that look like?
Let's go back to your coffee shop entrepreneur. They pitch a weird idea, people push back. The entrepreneur then says, wait, let me explain the from state.
Okay.
They meticulously articulate the exact hidden pain of the way things are currently done. They map out the structural inefficiencies, the wasted time, the emotional toll of the status quo. Then they map out the new to state. The test is this. Does the market eventually have an aha moment?
Does the light bulb go on?
Exactly. Do their eyes suddenly widen as they realize they've been living with a problem they don't actually need to live with anymore? Do they suddenly feel the pain you just described?
Okay, I see.
If you masterfully market the problem and the customer still shrugs and says, yeah, I don't care, that's not a real problem for me, then you might just be wrong. Your category might be a hallucination.
Right.
But if articulating the problem creates a sudden magnetic pull toward your solution, if the disbelief turns into relief, You have successfully designed a new category.
I absolutely love that distinction. The initial disbelief is required, but it must eventually give way to relief once the problem is fully illuminated.
It's like turning on the lights in a dirty room. People are shocked at first, but then they immediately want the vacuum cleaner.
That is a perfect analogy. So the practical takeaway for you here is to actively embrace the discomfort of being misunderstood at the beginning of your journey.
You have to.
If you pitch your vision and everyone instantly gets it, you need to go back to the drawing board. Expect resistance.
Expect it externally from the market. Who wants to keep doing things the old way?
And expect it internally from your own team who might get scared and just want to build something safer.
Yeah.
Realize that if you aren't facing a healthy dose of disbelief, your vision probably isn't big enough to create a totally new category.
It requires immense conviction. You are literally asking people to abandon their mental models. You are telling them the Earth isn't the center of the universe anymore. You are changing the weather. And people are deeply afraid of storms.
Okay, let's pull all of these incredible threads together. The soul of this chapter, the ultimate synthesis of everything we've unpacked over this deep dive, is that legendary, world-changing companies absolutely do not leave their market position to chance.
No, they don't.
They do not build a bag of doorknobs and hope someone comes along looking for a door. They do not rely on the dumb luck of a lightning strike in a thunderstorm.
Category design is the intentional, systematic, and highly courageous architecture of a completely new space.
It is recognizing that the era of winning purely on product features is over. It requires you to look at the infinite noise of the modern market and carve out a distinct, quiet space that you entirely own.
And it requires you to act like a symphony conductor. You have to have the mandate as a leader to align your product development, your company culture, your PR strategy, and your sales compensation to all play the exact same sheet music.
You have to meticulously construct the from-to journey. You have to be brave enough to explicitly market a new problem, shining a spotlight on the hidden pain of the status quo.
You have to have the courage to be non-consensus, forcing the world to leave their old assumptions behind and step into the brand new universe that you have designed for them.
And if you do it right, the reward is absolute disproportionate dominance. You don't just win a 5% larger share of an existing market.
You become the undisputed king of a market that you conjured into existence.
Yeah.
You make the rules.
Now, obviously, knowing that you have to build your own category rather than just fighting in someone else's is only the first step.
Right, it's just the beginning.
The natural next question is, how exactly do you find that hidden, missing insight in the market to actually discover your category? How do you know what kind of weather to make?
That is the million-dollar question.
And that is exactly the mechanics we are going to uncover in our next deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today.
Let's hear it.
If you were forced to abandon your current flagship product, or if you had to entirely abandon your primary professional skill tomorrow, what is the fundamental underlying problem you are uniquely positioned to solve?
Think about that deeply.
Stripped of your current title and your current features, what is the pain you understand better than anyone else in the world? And what completely new category could you build around just solving that one specific problem?
Are you spending your days polishing a bag of doorknobs, or are you designing the experience?
Stop hoping for lightning. Start making the weather.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.